While I was having dinner at my son's house, my neighbor called me and asked in a trembling voice, "Harrison, are you home?" "No, I am having dinner at my son's house," I replied, confused. He whispered, "Then who is in your house right now?" My blood ran cold, but before I could answer, my son Tyrone looked up from his plate. He did not look surprised. He did not look worried. He just threw his head back and laughed, a sound so hollow and cruel it made my skin crawl. "That is the cleaning crew." "Pop," he said, wiping his mouth. "We sold it this afternoon. You do not live there anymore. My name is Harrison Cole, and I am 70 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer, building bridges that could withstand hurricanes and skyscrapers that scraped the belly of the clouds. I know how to calculate load-bearing limits. I know exactly how much pressure a beam can take before it snaps. But sitting at that mahogany table in the middle of an upscale Buckhead suburb, I realized I had no idea how much pressure a father could take before he broke. I sat there staring at the cold piece of chicken on my porcelain plate, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my stomach. This was supposed to be a family dinner, a time to connect, but the air in the dining room was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. My son Tyrone sat at the head of the table wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He is 32 years old, a stockbroker who talks fast and lives faster. But tonight his eyes were darting around the room, avoiding mine as if I were a creditor come to collect. To his right sat his wife, Emily. She is 28 years old, with blonde hair that is always perfectly styled and a phone that is surgically attached to her hand. Emily calls herself an influencer. She spends her days taking photos of latte art and posting about social justice causes she knows nothing about. To her, I am not a father-in-law or an elder worthy of respect. I am a prop, a relic. Convenient way to show her followers how inclusive and caring she is while treating me like a piece of furniture that clashes with her modern decor. The dinner was a disaster from the start. The food was bland and lukewarm, a catered meal pretending to be home-cooked. Emily pushed a bowl of quinoa salad toward me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You need to eat more." "Harrison," she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone people use with toddlers or pets. "We read an article today about how important nutrition is for seniors, especially those with cognitive decline." I gripped my fork tighter. "I do not have cognitive decline. My mind is as sharp as it was the day I patented a hydraulic system that is currently being used in half the buildings in downtown Atlanta. But they need me to be weak. They need me to be confused. It fits their narrative." "I am fine, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "I just am not hungry." She exchanged a look with Tyrone, a look that said, "See, I told you he is. I told you he..." Difficult. Then she turned back to me, sipping her white wine. "We were just thinking." "Dad." Tyrone started finally looking at me, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "This house, you know the old place. It is a lot of work for one person. The stairs, the yard maintenance. It is dangerous. Here we go again. The same conversation we have been having for 6 months. They want me out of my house. The house I bought with my late wife Odette in the 80s. The house where we raised Tyrone. The house that is fully paid off and holds every memory I have left of the woman I loved for 40 years. I am perfectly capable of taking care of my house," I said, cutting him off. "I fixed the roof myself. Last spring. I mow my own lawn. I am not an invalid." Emily sighed, placing her hand on Tyrone's arm, as if to calm him down, implying that I was the one being unreasonable. "It is not about capability, Harrison. It is about community," she said softly, the word dripping with fake sweetness. "We found this amazing facility just 20 minutes from here. It has assisted living, wonderful nurses and so many activities. You would be with people your own generation, instead of being isolated in that old neighborhood." Facility. That is the polite word for a warehouse where they store old people until they die. I looked around their dining room. I saw the crystal chandelier, the imported rugs, the art on the walls that looked expensive but meant nothing. And then my eyes caught something else, under the edge of the linen tablecloth. Near Tyrone's elbow, a stack of envelopes was peeking out. They were pink and red, not greetings cards, final notice bills. My engineer brain started calculating. Tyrone drives a leased BMW. Emily spends thousands on clothes to maintain her image, and yet they are hiding utility bills under the table. My son is not worried about my isolation. He is worried about his cash flow. He sees me not as a father, but as a piggy bank that is taking too long to break open. I was about to point out the envelopes when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was loud in the silent room, startling Emily. "I apologize," I said, pulling out my old sturdy phone. It was Mr. Jenkins, my neighbor of 30 years, a Vietnam veteran who sleeps with one eye open and trusts no one except me and his German shepherd. "He never calls unless the house is on fire," I answered immediately. "Hello, Jenkins. Harrison." Jenkins' voice was low, tight, with a controlled panic that scared me more than if he had been screaming. "Where are you? Are you home?" "No, I am at Tyrone S. place for dinner." "Why? What is wrong?" "Listen to me carefully, Harrison. There is a truck in your driveway, a big box truck, no license plates, hardly any markings. 3 men are breaking down your front door right now." My hand tightened around the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "What are you talking about? Is it a robbery? Did you call the police?" "I do not think it is a robbery, Harrison. They are not sneaking around. They are moving fast. They just carried out your recliner in Harrison. They just tossed a box of vinyl records onto the front lawn. It looks like they are clearing the place out. My vinyl collection. Odette gave me those records. The original Miles Davis pressings. The Coltrane albums we used to dance to on Sunday mornings. They were throwing them on the grass like trash." I stood up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. Floor startling Emily, who dropped her fork. "Harrison, what is it?" she asked, annoyed. "Who is calling you at this hour?" I ignored her. My eyes locked onto Tyrone. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his wine glass, twirling the stem, his jaw clenched tight. "I am coming home, Jenkins. Do not let them leave." I barked into the phone and hung up. I looked at my son. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a warning drumbeat of betrayal. "Tyrone." He did not look up. "Tyrone, look at me." I commanded, my voice booming with the authority I used to wield on construction sites. He slowly lifted his eyes, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. There was no guilt, there was no shame, there was only a manic glassiness, the look of a man who has pushed all his chips into the center of the table and is waiting for the roulette wheel to stop. Jenkins says, "There are men in my house. They are taking my things." "Who are they?" "Tyrone." The silence stretched for a second, 2 seconds, then Tyrone smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a jagged, broken thing. "They are not taking your things, Pop," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "They are clearing the property. Those are the movers." "Movers," I whispered, the room starting to spin. "What are you talking about?" "We sold it," Emily chimed in, picking up her wine glass again as if we were discussing the weather. "We closed the deal this afternoon. A cash buyer, investors. They wanted immediate possession. It was a great deal." "Harrison, really? You should be thanking us. Sold it." I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "You cannot sell my house. It is my house. The deed is in my name." Tyrone let out a short, sharp laugh. "Not anymore. Remember the papers you signed last month? The insurance updates? The medical proxy? You signed a power of attorney. Pop, a full, durable power of attorney giving me control over your assets if you were deemed incapacitated." I stared at him. My mind flashed back to the pile of documents he had brought me weeks ago when I had the flu. He said they were just standard updates for my health insurance. He said he wanted to make sure everything was covered in case I got sick again. I had trusted him. He is my son. I signed them without reading the fine print, because who thinks their own child is handing them a death warrant? "I am not incapacitated," I growled, stepping toward him. "I am standing right here." "Dr. Evans disagrees," Emily said, checking her fingernails. "We have a letter from him stating that you have been showing signs of severe dementia, paranoia, confusion, aggression. It was enough to activate the power of attorney. The sale is legal." "Harrison, the money has already been wired for $150,000. Tyrone said, the number rolling off his tongue like a prayer cash. "Pop, do you know what that kind of money does? It solves everything. No more mortgage, No more sharks. No more problems. Sharks. The word hung in the air. I looked at the red envelopes under the tablecloth again. This was not just greed. This was desperation. My son was in trouble. Deep trouble. And he had decided to sacrifice me to save himself. "You sold my home," I said, my voice trembling. Not with age, but with a rage so hot it felt like it could melt steel. "You sold the house your mother died in. You threw her records on the lawn. It is just stuff." "Harrison," Emily snapped, finally dropping the sweet act. "You do not need a 4-bedroom house. You are one man. It is selfish, really hoarding all that equity when your family is struggling. We did this for us. For the family. For the family." I looked at Tyrone, expecting him to say something to defend me, to show some shred of the boy I raised, but he just poured himself another glass of wine, his hand shaking slightly. "It is done, Pop," he said, refusing to meet my eyes again. "You do not live there anymore. You live here now. We fixed up the basement for you. It is better this way. You are safe here, and we have the money. Everyone wins. The basement. They sold my life, my memories, my independence, and they were going to put me in the basement like an old broken tool." I did not scream. I did not flip the table. My engineer-esque mind took over. Assess the structural damage, identify the failure point, calculate the response. "This is not over," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Tyrone laughed again. That awful hyena sound. "Oh, but it is. Pop, the locks are being changed as we speak. The new owners have the keys. And you," he pointed a finger at me, "you are just a confused old man who needs his son to take care of him. Sit down and eat your dinner. You are not going anywhere." I looked at the door, then I looked at the car keys sitting on the kitchen island. "My truck keys, key." Lunged. Tyrone was younger and faster, but he was soft. He had spent his life in air-conditioned offices, sitting in ergonomic chairs. I had spent 40 years climbing steel girders and carrying concrete. I hit him with a shoulder check that knocked the wind out of him and sent him crashing into the sideboard. Crystal glasses shattered, raining down like jagged confetti. Harrison, Emily screamed, jumping up. "Stop it! You are crazy!" I grabbed my keys off the counter. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my chest. "Run! Run! Run! I am going home!" I shouted over my shoulder. "You cannot drive!" Tyrone gasped, struggling to get up from the floor. "You are not insured anymore. I canceled it." I did not listen. I slammed the front door behind me and sprinted to my old Ford F-150. It was a beat-up truck, rusted around the wheel wells, but the engine was solid. I turned the key and the V8 roared to life, a sound of freedom and fury. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Tyrone running out the front door, his face red with rage. He was shouting something, waving his arms, but I was already gone. Tires screeching against the asphalt. I drove faster than I should have, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The streetlights blurred past like streaks of fire. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the nightmare. They sold it. They forged my consent. They think I am crazy. I reached for my phone again and dialed Jenkins. "I am 5 minutes away," I told him. "Are they still there?" "Yeah," Jenkins replied, his voice grim. "And Harrison, you better hurry. One of them just brought out a sledgehammer. They are taking down the framing on the porch. My porch. The porch I built with my own hands the summer Odette was pregnant with Tyrone. The porch where we sat and watched him learn to ride a bike. The porch where I held Odette's hand as she took her last breaths, enjoying the fresh air one last time. They were destroying it. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, the engine whined in protest, but the truck surged forward. I was not just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, for my history, and God help anyone who stood in my way. As I turned onto my street, I saw the flashing lights, not police lights, orange hazard lights. A massive dumpster was sitting in the middle of my driveway, overflowing with my furniture, my life piled up like garbage. And there in the yard were 3 men. One of them was swinging a sledgehammer into the railing of my porch. Splinters of wood flew into the night air. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I honked the horn, a long, angry blast, and drove my truck right up onto the lawn, aiming straight for the man with the hammer. He dove out of the way just in time, dropping the tool. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt, tearing up the grass. Odette used to tend so carefully. I kicked the door open and stepped out, grabbing the tire iron from behind the seat. "Get off my property!" I roared, my voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. The men stopped looking at each other confused. They were big, burly men just doing a job. But they paused when they saw me. I might be 70 years old, but tonight, with the tire iron in my hand and the fire of betrayal in my eyes, I must have looked like a demon. "Hey, old-timer," one of them said, holding up his hands. "We have a work order," the owner said, to gut the place. "I am the owner," I shouted, swinging the iron through the air. "Make a move and I will show you how much fight this old man has left." Just then, a sleek black car screeched to a halt at the curb. Tyrone and Emily jumped out, followed closely by a police cruiser with its lights flashing. "Officer, that is him," Tyrone shouted, pointing at me dramatically. "That is my father. He is having a psychotic break. He has a weapon. He is dangerous." The two police officers stepped out of their car, hands hovering over their holsters. They were young, white, and looking at an angry black man holding a steel bar in a nice neighborhood. I knew exactly how this looked. Yeah. "Knew the danger I was in. Drop the weapon, sir," one of the officers yelled, blinding me with his flashlight. "Drop it now." I looked at Tyrone. He was standing behind the police, smirking slightly. He had the paperwork. He had the narrative. He had the power, or so he thought. I lowered the tire iron slowly, dropping it to the grass, raising my hands. "This is my house," I said, my voice breaking. "My son is stealing my house." "Sir." "Step away from the vehicle," the officer commanded, ignoring my words. "We have a report of a disturbance and trespassing." "Trespassing?" I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. At my own home that night, as the cuffs clicked around my wrists cold and tight, I looked at Tyrone. He was holding Emily, putting on a show of the concerned, grieving son. But his eyes were dead. "Do not worry, Pop," he whispered as the officer shoved me into the back of the squad car. "We will get you the help you need. The basement is waiting." He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. But as the police car pulled away, leaving my home to be torn apart by vultures, I made a vow. I am Harrison Cole. I built skyscrapers. I survived storms, and I was going to bring this whole house of cards crashing down on their heads no matter what it cost me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. You are not going anywhere, Harrison. Emily hissed, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. She looked small and fragile in her designer silk blouse, but her eyes held the cold, dead stare of a shark. She blocked the exit to the kitchen, her body rigid. "You cannot drive. The insurance is canceled. Remember? And the keys to your truck are gone. I took them off your ring while you were in the bathroom." She held up a set of keys, dangling them tauntingly. The metal jingled a sound that was meant to make me feel helpless, like a child who had lost his privileges. She thought she had won. She thought that by taking the keys, she had stripped me of my agency. But Emily did not know about the spare key. I kept a duplicate ignition key on a small brass hook behind the pantry door, hidden under an old calendar. It was a habit from 40 years of marriage, a backup plan because Odette used to lose everything. I did not waste breath arguing. I did not beg. I calculated the distance between us and the structural integrity of the obstacle in my path. Tyrone was scrambling to his feet behind me, groaning from the shove I had given him moments ago. I had seconds before he recovered. I stepped forward, my heavy work boots thudding against the hardwood floor. Emily flinched, expecting me to hit her. I saw the flash of fear in her eyes, the realization that she had pushed a man too far. But I did not touch her. I am a man who builds things, not a man who strikes women. Instead, I reached past her, my arm brushing her shoulder as I ripped the pantry door open. I grabbed the brass key from its hook. The metal felt cold and sharp in my palm, a talisman of freedom. "What are you doing?" Tyrone shouted, lunging for me. He grabbed the back of my jacket, his fingers digging into the fabric. I spun around, using the momentum to break his grip. I was 70 years old and my joints ached when it rained, but I had spent my life lifting steel beams and pouring concrete. Tyrone had spent his life lifting lattes and poring over spreadsheets. There was no contest. I drove my shoulder into his chest, not hard enough to break ribs, but hard enough to knock the wind out of him again. He stumbled back, crashing into the kitchen island, gasping for air. "Harrison, stop!" Emily shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. "You are having an episode. You are dangerous." I ignored her. I slammed the door leading to the garage and locked it behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was satisfying, a small victory in a night of defeats. I ran to my truck, my 1990 Ford F-150. It was beat up. The paint was peeling and the upholstery smelled like old coffee and sawdust, but it was mine. I jammed the spare key into the ignition and prayed. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life with a familiar throaty growl. It was the sound of loyalty. I hit the button for the garage door, but nothing happened. They had cut the power to the opener. Of course they had. They had thought of everything, or so they believed. I put the truck in reverse and looked in the rearview mirror. The garage door was reinforced, aluminum sturdy but not invincible. I revved the engine, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "I am sorry, Odette," I whispered. I released the brake and slammed on the gas. The truck shot backward. The impact was deafening. Metal screeched, wood splintered, and the garage door buckled outward, tearing off its tracks. The truck shuddered but kept moving, bursting through the barrier and into the cool night air. I did not look back at the house. I shifted gears and peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on their pristine suburban lawn. I drove faster than I should have. The streetlights blurred into streaks of yellow fire. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, anger and adrenaline mixing into a potent cocktail. They sold my house. The words played on a loop in my mind. They sold my memories. They sold my life. It took me 20 minutes to cross town to the old neighborhood. The streets here were narrower, the trees older, the houses modest, but built with care. As I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. It looked like a war zone. A massive orange dumpster sat in the middle of my driveway. It was already half full of my life. My recliner, the one I sat in every Sunday to watch football, was upside down, its fabric torn. My bookshelf, the one I built by hand for Odette's mystery novels, was smashed into pieces. 3 men were moving like ants over the carcass of my home. They were hauling boxes out the front door, throwing them into the dumpster with careless indifference. One of them was carrying a large framed photograph. It was the portrait of Odette and me from our 40th anniversary. The glass caught the light from the street lamp for a second before the man tossed it onto the pile of debris. I heard the glass shatter. That sound broke something inside me. I did not park the truck. I abandoned it right in the middle of the street, the door hanging open. I reached behind the seat and grabbed the tire iron. It was a heavy piece of solid steel rusted at the handle, cold and unforgiving. "Hey!" I roared, my voice cracking with fury. "Get away from my house!" The men stopped. They were big, burly movers wearing reflective vests. They looked at me confused at first, then amused. An old black man in a flannel shirt waving a metal bar. "Easy there, Pops," one of them said, stepping forward. He was holding a lamp. My lamp, the one Odette bought at a flea market in Savannah. "You need to clear out. We are working here." "Put it down," I commanded, stepping onto the grass. My lawn, usually manicured, was trampled and muddy. "Put it down, or I will put you down." The man laughed. He actually laughed. "Look, old-timer, the owner wants this place gutted by morning. Go home and take your meds." I did not think I just reacted. I swung the tire iron with all the strength I had left. I did not aim for the man. I aimed for their truck. The steel bar connected with the windshield of their box truck with a sickening crunch, the safety glass spiderwebbed, instantly turning opaque white. "What the hell?" the man shouted, dropping the lamp. It shattered on the driveway. I swung again, taking out the side mirror. I swung again, denting the fender with a loud metallic clang. "Get off my property," I screamed, swinging the iron through the air, creating a perimeter of rage. "This is my home." The men backed away, hands raised, realizing this was not a normal job. This was a man with nothing left to lose. "Call the cops," one of them yelled, running toward the cab of the truck. I stood there in the middle of my yard, chest heaving the tire, iron heavy in my hand. I was surrounded by the wreckage of my life, the broken glass, the splintered wood, the torn photographs. It was all garbage to them. To me, it was evidence of my existence. Then the world turned red and blue. Sirens wailed, cutting through the night air. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt at the curb, blocking my truck. Doors flew open and officers spilled out, weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon, police! Drop it now!" The beam of a flashlight blinded me. I raised my hand to shield my eyes, but I did not drop the iron. Not yet. I was holding on to it like an anchor. "I live here," I shouted, squinting into the light. "These men are looting my house." "Sir, put the weapon on the ground or we will shoot." The voice was young, tight with adrenaline. I knew the statistics. I knew what happens when a black man holds a weapon in front of the police. I knew I was seconds away from dying on my own front lawn. Slowly, painfully, I lowered the tire iron. I let it fall to the grass. It made a dull thud. "On your knees, hands behind your head." Now I sank to my knees, the wet grass soaking through my jeans. My knees ached, but I barely felt it. I clasped my hands behind my head, interlacing my fingers, just as I had taught Tyrone to do if he ever got stopped. Just then, a sleek black BMW pulled up behind the police cars. Tyrone and Emily jumped out. They looked immaculate, untouched by the chaos. Tyrone adjusted his tie as he walked toward the officers. Emily was already crying, covering her mouth with her hand, in a performance worthy of an award. "Officer." "Thank God," Tyrone said, breathless, his voice projecting the perfect image of a concerned citizen. "That is my father. He is confused. He has been having episodes." The officer, a young white man with a buzz cut, lowered his weapon slightly but kept it trained on me. "Is this your property, sir?" the officer asked Tyrone. "Yes," Tyrone replied smoothly, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It belongs to the Cole Family Trust. I am the trustee. My father has severe dementia. We tried to transition him to a care facility tonight, but he became violent. He assaulted me and stole a vehicle to come here." "He is lying," I shouted from the ground, spitting out a blade of grass. "He is a liar. He stole my house." Emily stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, clinging to Tyrone's arm. "Officer, please do not hurt him. He does not know what he is doing. He thinks he still lives here. It is heartbreaking, really. We just want to get him help." The officer looked at me. Then he looked at Tyrone in his expensive suit and Emily with her designer bag. He saw a successful young couple dealing with a senile, dangerous relative. He saw what they wanted him to see. "Do you have paperwork, sir?" the officer asked, holstering his gun. "Yes," Tyrone said, pulling a folded document from his pocket. "I have a durable power of attorney. It grants me full control over his medical and financial decisions due to his incapacitation. Here is the doctor's note certifying his condition." He handed the papers to the two. "Officer," I watched from my knees, helpless. The officer clicked on his flashlight and scanned the documents. "This looks in order," the officer said, nodding. He turned to his partner. "Cuff him. Disturbing the peace, trespassing, and destruction of property." "Trespassing." I whispered the word, tasting like bile. "This is my house. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore, Harrison," Emily said softly, her voice dripping with fake sympathy as she walked past me toward the house, avoiding eye contact. "The house was sold this afternoon. The new owners take possession tomorrow. We are just clearing out the junk." "Junk." She called my life junk. The officer grabbed my wrists and pulled them behind my back. The handcuffs clicked shut, cold and tight, biting into my skin. I was hoisted to my feet, not gently. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer droned. But I stopped listening. I looked at Tyrone. He was standing by the dumpster watching me. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were dancing. He had won. He had the house. He had the money. He had the police on his side. "I am sorry." "Pop," he said loud enough for the officers to hear. "We are doing this for your own good. You are not safe on your own." They shoved me into the back of the squad car. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable, the cage separating me from the officers, a stark reminder of my new status. I was no longer a citizen. I was a problem to be managed. Through the window, I watched the movers go back to work. They started throwing more boxes into the dumpster. I saw my tackle box, the one I planned to give to my grandson, if I ever had one, fly through the air and crash into the metal bin. Tyrone put his arm around Emily, and they walked toward the house, my house as if they owned it. They did not look back at me. As the police car pulled away, the red and blue lights reflecting off the broken windows of my home, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. They thought this was the end. They thought they had buried me under paperwork and lies. They were wrong. I sat up straight in the back of the cruiser, ignoring the pain in my shoulders. I did not cry. I did not shout. I started to plan. Because Tyrone had made one fatal mistake. He thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He forgot that I was an engineer, and engineers know that every structure, no matter how impressive, has a weak point. You just have to find it and apply the right amount of pressure. I closed my eyes and listened to the siren. It was not the sound of defeat. It was the sound of the war beginning. The fluorescent lights of the police station hummed with a low headache-inducing buzz. I sat on a hard wooden bench, my wrists sore where the metal cuffs had bitten into the skin. It was 2 a.m. The station smelled of stale coffee and misery. I was 70 years old, a man who had never broken a law in his life. Yet here I was waiting like a common criminal for someone to claim me. Finally, the heavy security door buzzed open. Tyrone walked in. He did not look worried. He looked annoyed. He was adjusting his silk tie, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of arrogance and impatience. He signed the paperwork at the front desk with a flourish of his expensive pen, not even glancing at me until the officer unlocked the holding cell gate. "Let us go, Pop," Tyrone said, his voice flat. "You are lucky I have friends in the department, or you would be spending the night in county." I stood up slowly, my knees popping. I wanted to tell him that I did not need his luck, that I needed my home, but I kept my mouth shut. I followed him out into the cool Atlanta night. The air was thick with humidity. "Get in the car," he commanded, pointing to his BMW. I climbed into the passenger seat. The leather was soft. The interior smelled of new car and vanilla. It was a stark contrast to the rusty truck I had just lost. We drove in silence. The city lights blurred past, reflected in the dark windows. I watched the route, expecting him to turn toward the old neighborhood, toward the wreckage of my home. But he turned left toward the highway, toward Buckhead. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice raspy. "We are going home," Tyrone replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "My house, not yours. Yours is gone. Pop, get used to it." The drive took 20 minutes. When we pulled into his driveway, the massive house loomed in the darkness like a fortress. Emily was waiting at the front door. Her arms crossed her face, a mask of disapproval. "I cannot believe you caused such a scene," she hissed as we walked up the steps. The neighbors were watching. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" I did not answer. I just looked at her, thinking about the days when I used to bounce her on my knee, thinking she was a sweet girl, good for my son. I had been blind. Inside the house was cool and quiet. Tyrone did not lead me to the guest room with the plush carpet and the queen-sized bed where I had stayed during holidays. No, he led me to the kitchen and opened the narrow door that led downstairs, the basement down. "You go," Pop Tyrone said, gesturing into the darkness. I looked at him, then at the dark stairwell. "You are putting me in the cellar." "It is a finished basement," Tyrone said, defensive. "We put a bed down there. It is private. You will have your own space. And honestly, after tonight, I do not trust you upstairs. You might try to burn the place down." I walked down the stairs. The air grew cooler with every step, damp and heavy. The smell of mildew and unwashed concrete hit me. It was a finished basement in name only. The walls were drywall but unpainted. The floor was cold linoleum. In the corner sat a lumpy twin mattress on a metal frame dressed with old sheets. I recognized from my house 20 years ago. "This is it," Tyrone said, standing at the top of the stairs. "Do not try to leave. The alarm is set. If you open a door or window, the police will be here in 3 minutes, and this time I will not bail you out." He closed the door. The lock clicked. A heavy, final sound. I was a prisoner in the home of the son I had raised. I stood in the darkness for a long time, listening to his footsteps recede overhead. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. There was a small window high up on the wall covered by a metal grate, moonlight filtering through in thin bars. Most men would have screamed. Most men would have pounded on the door, begging to be let out, begging for dignity. But I am not most men. I am a structural engineer. I know that when a building collapses, you do not panic. You find the pocket of air, you conserve your oxygen, and you wait for the right moment to dig yourself out. I sat down on the lumpy mattress. The springs groaned. It was humiliating, degrading, but I did not let the shame take root. Instead, I focused on the anger. It was a cold, hard knot in my chest, a fuel source. I reached inside my heavy army jacket. It was an old M65 field coat, faded olive drab, frayed at the cuffs. Tyrone and Emily hated it. They called it hobo-ware. They had not bothered to search me because they could not imagine anything of value, being inside such a ragged piece of clothing. But they were wrong. I ran my fingers along the inside seam near the left armpit. There was a small opening I had sewn there years ago, a hidden pocket designed for emergencies. I slipped my hand inside and felt the cool plastic of my burner phone. A simple Nokia brick, sturdy and reliable, fully charged. I also pulled out a small leather notebook no bigger than a deck of cards. I checked the screen. 1 bar of signal. It was enough. I dialed a number from memory. It rang once, twice. Then a gruff voice answered, "Harrison. It is 3 a.m. This better be good." "Ross," I said, keeping my voice to a whisper. "They did it. They sold the house." There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of rustling paper. Ross was my attorney, my confidant, and the only man who knew the true extent of my net worth. He was a shark in a cheap suit, and he had been waiting for this call. "Are you safe?" Ross asked, his tone sharpening. "I am in Tyrone S. basement, locked in. Said I have my notebook." "Okay," Ross said, all business. "Do you want me to send the cavalry? I can have the police there in 20 minutes. We can file for elder abuse, illegal confinement, fraud." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet." "Why not, Harrison?" They crossed the line. "Because if we strike now, we only get them for the house," I said, looking at the shadows dancing on the concrete floor. "I want to know why, Ross. I want to know the whole picture. Tyrone is desperate. You do not sell your father's house in a cash deal in one afternoon unless you have a gun to your head. I need to know who is holding the gun." "Fair enough," Ross said. "What are your orders?" "Watch the money," I instructed. "The sale proceeds. $450,000. It should hit Tyrone's account tomorrow morning. I want to know where every single cent goes. Do not freeze it. Let him feel rich. Let him feel safe." "Understood," Ross said. "And Harrison?" "Yeah, keep your phone off during the day. Check in only at night. Stay sharp. Old friend?" I ended the call and slipped the phone and notebook back into the hidden lining of my jacket. I patted the fabric smooth, making sure it looked flat. I lay back on the mattress, staring at the unfinished ceiling beams. I counted the joists, analyzing the load distribution. It was a calming exercise, a way to keep my mind from spiraling. I must have dozed off because I was jolted awake by the sound of voices. It was not morning yet. The basement was still dark, but light was bleeding through the cracks in the floorboards above me. Tyrone and Emily were in the kitchen, directly overhead. The house was old construction, and the HVAC vents acted like a primitive intercom system carrying sound straight down to me. I stood up and moved quietly to the corner where the metal ductwork ran along the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold, galvanized steel. I cannot believe we pulled it off. Emily's voice echoed down, tinny and distorted, but clear enough. She sounded drunk, giddy. 450,000, Tyrone. We are rich. We are not rich. Tyrone's voice was tighter, anxious. We are safe. There is a difference. Oh, stop being such a killjoy, she snapped. We deserve this. Do you know how hard it has been pretending to care about that old man, smelling his old man smell, listening to his boring stories about bridges? We earned this money. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. We have to move the funds as soon as the wire clears, Tyrone said, ignoring her. Do not spend a dime. Emily, I mean it. Why not? She whined. I saw this handbag. Tyrone, a Birkin, vintage. It is only $12,000 and we need a vacation. The Maldives. Everyone is going to the Maldives. We can take the photos, post them. It will boost my engagement numbers. Like crazy. We can leave him down there with a timed feeder for all I care. We cannot go to the Maldives. Tyrone hissed, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Listen to me. The Greeks are not patient. The deadline is Friday. The Greeks. Emily went silent for a moment. Who are the Greeks? The bookies. Emily. The guys I owe. Tyrone sounded like he was on the verge of tears. I am down $200,000. I tried to double down on tech stocks last month and lost. Then I tried to make it back on the games. It spiraled. Okay. They told me if I did not have the cash by Friday, they were going to break my legs, and then they were going to come for you. I froze against the ductwork. $200,000. My son was not just a bad investor. He was a gambler, and he was in deep with loan sharks. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "You owe $200,000. "Yes," Tyrone said. "But the house sold for $450. We pay the Greeks, and we still have $250,000 left. We are clear, Em. We are out of the hole. We can pay off the mortgage on this place, get the credit cards under control. We just have to keep the old man quiet for a few months until the heat dies down. Then we can dump him in a state home." So that was it. I was not just a burden. Was collateral damage in his gambling addiction. He had sold 40 years of my life to cover his mistakes. "And what about the rest?" Emily asked her, greed resurfacing quickly, fighting through the fear. 250 is not that much, Tyrone. We need more. We will get more, Tyrone assured her. I went through his papers in the basement. He has a pension. It is not huge, but it is steady. We can siphon that. And the truck? We can sell the truck for parts. It all adds up. We just have to keep him confused. Keep him drugged. Keep him down there. They laughed. It was a nervous, conspiratorial laugh, the laugh of two people who had just gotten away with murder and were already planning how to spend the inheritance. I stepped away from the vent, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. My son was not just ungrateful, he was a criminal. He was willing to bury me in a basement and medicate me into oblivion to save his own skin. I walked back to the mattress and sat down. The anger was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer a hot fire, it was cold steel. They wanted to play games. They wanted to talk about money, about debts, about hiding assets. I touched the notebook inside my jacket. The notebook that contained the access codes to a trust fund in Delaware, holding royalties from 3 structural patents. I filed in 1992, patents that generated nearly $2 million a year in passive income. Tyrone thought he had won the lottery with a $400,000 house sale. He had no idea he was sitting on top of a gold mine, and he had no idea that the man in the basement held the detonator. I lay down and closed my eyes. For the first time in hours, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a rabbit walk into a trap. Let them have their champagne, let them pay the Greeks. I thought I am going to take everything else. The sun had barely begun to bleed through the cracks in the floorboards above. When the lock on the basement door clicked open, I was already awake, sitting on the edge of the lumpy mattress, my back straight against the cold concrete wall. I had spent the night counting the rivets in the ductwork, keeping my mind sharp while my body ached from the dampness. My stomach growled, a hollow reminder that I had not eaten since the previous day before my life was stolen. Emily came down the stairs holding a tray. Her heels clicked loudly on the wooden steps, a sound that did not belong in a cellar. She was wearing a pink silk robe and her face was freshly scrubbed, but her eyes held a manic energy that made me tense. She looked like a nurse in a horror movie, the kind who smiles while tightening the straps. "Good morning, Harrison," she chirped, placing the tray on a cardboard box she was using as a table. "I brought you breakfast, oatmeal, and fruit, just the way you should be eating. And I brought your vitamins. You need to keep your strength up." I looked at the bowl of oatmeal. It was gray and lumpy, sitting next to a glass of orange juice that looked too bright. On the side of the tray was a small paper cup containing 2 pills. One was white, and round the other a capsule filled with blue powder. "I do not take vitamins." "Emily," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. "My doctor says my levels are fine." "Oh, but these are special," she said, pushing the cup toward me. "Tyrone and I spoke to a specialist. He said these are essential for your cognitive health. Brain food, Harrison. It will help with the confusion." Confusion. I stared at her. I knew exactly what day it was. I knew the load-bearing capacity of the beam directly above her head. I knew that the humidity in this room was rising, which meant it was likely raining outside. I was not the one who was confused. I picked up the cup and sniffed it subtly. I spent 40 years working with industrial materials, solvents, and chemical compounds. You do not spend that much time on construction sites without learning to identify things by smell. The white pill had a faint, chalky odor, but the blue capsule smelled bitter, metallic. It was not a vitamin. It smelled like a sedative, specifically a benzodiazepine derivative often used to subdue agitated patients. They were drugging me. They wanted me pliable, quiet, and drooling. I looked up at Emily. She was watching me closely, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. If I refused, she would call Tyrone. He would force it down my throat. Or worse, they would call the doctors they had bribed and say I was refusing medication, proving my incompetence. I had to play their game. "Thank you, Emily," I said, forcing a tremor into my hand. "I appreciate you taking care of me." I put the pills in my mouth, but I did not swallow. I slid them under my tongue, a trick I had seen a man do in the army 50 years ago. I took a large gulp of orange juice, making a show of swallowing, hard, wincing as if the pills were large. "Good job," she cooed, patting my shoulder like I was a golden retriever. "Now eat up. I will come back for the tray later." She turned and clip-clopped back up the stairs, locking the door behind her. The moment the bolt slid home, I rushed to the small utility sink in the corner. I spat the pills into my hand. The blue capsule had already started to dissolve, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I turned on the tap, just a trickle to avoid noise, and washed my mouth out, scraping my tongue with my teeth. I looked at the pills in my palm. They were strong enough to knock out a horse. If I had taken them, I would have been asleep in 20 minutes, waking up foggy and disoriented, exactly how they wanted me. I crushed the pills under my boot, grinding them into fine powder, then washed the dust down the drain. I ate the oatmeal even though it tasted like paste. I needed the energy. I was going to need every ounce of strength for what was coming. 2 hours later, the door opened again. This time Emily was dressed for the public. She wore a stylish beige sweater and jeans, her hair curled perfectly, and her makeup flawless. She was carrying a tripod and a circular light, a ring light, I think they call it. "Come on, Harrison," she said, gesturing for me to stand up. "We are going to sit in the nice chair over there." She pointed to an old wooden chair she had dragged into the center of the room where the light from the single bulb was dimmest. She set up the tripod and attached her phone, clicking on the ring light until it blinded me with an artificial white halo. "What is this?" I asked, squinting. "We are just going to say hi to some friends," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming soft and concerned. "Just follow my lead, Harrison, and try not to look so angry. It scares people." She pressed a button on her phone and her face transformed. Instantly, she looked exhausted, saintly, a martyr, carrying the weight of the world. "Hi, guys," she whispered to the phone screen. "Welcome back to our journey. I know I have not posted in a day, but it has been really hard. As you know, we had to move my father-in-law in with us yesterday. His dementia has progressed so fast, I watched her. Fascinated by the lie. She was building a narrative brick by brick. Yesterday was really scary. She continued, glancing at me with fearful eyes. He got violent. He did not know who Tyrone was. He thought we were stealing his house. We had to protect him from himself. It is so expensive providing this kind of 24-hour care. Guys, if you can spare anything, the link is in my bio. Every little bit helps us keep Harrison safe. She turned the camera toward me. "Say hi, Harrison," she said, her voice thick with fake emotion. "Do you know who I am?" I looked into the black lens of the phone. I saw the comments scrolling by, rapid-fire hearts and crying faces popping up on the screen. People were buying it. They saw a confused old man in a basement and a loving daughter-in-law doing her best. I could have screamed, I could have shouted that she was a liar and a thief, but that is exactly what a violent, demented man would do. It would prove her point. It would validate her story. So I made a choice. I decided to give her the best performance of my life. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes until they looked watery and vacant. I let a little bit of saliva gather at the corner of my mouth. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a heartbreaking, confused adoration. "Odette," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Odette, is that you? You came back." Emily froze for a second, caught off guard. But then she realized this was gold, absolute gold for her audience. Her eyes lit up with greed. "Oh, Harrison," she said, playing along, stepping into the frame to hug me stiffly. "I am Emily, remember? Odette is gone." "No. Odette." I reached out a trembling hand to touch her face, my fingers rough against her perfect makeup. "You look just like her. Did you make the pot roast?" I saw the comments on her screen explode. People were sending gifts, little digital animations that I knew cost real money. Poor man. He thinks she is his wife. She is an angel for doing this. God bless you, Emily. She pulled away, looking at the camera with a sad, brave smile. See, guys, she said, this is what we deal with every day. It is heartbreaking, but we love him. We will do whatever it takes. Thank you for the gifts. You guys are amazing. She ended the stream and the mask dropped instantly. The sad smile vanished, replaced by a smirk of triumph. That was perfect, she muttered, checking her analytics. We just made $2,000 in 10 minutes. Keep being crazy, Harrison. It pays the bills. She was so absorbed in her phone, scrolling through the praise, counting the money, that she did not notice me stand up. She turned her back to me, walking toward the stairs, tapping furiously on her screen. I need to get the lighting better next time, she mumbled to herself. Maybe put him in a different shirt. Something with stains. She set her phone down on the washing machine near the stairs, just for a second while she adjusted the ring light stand. She was confident, arrogant. She thought I was a vegetable. She thought the drugs had worked. I moved silent as a shadow. My work boots, usually heavy, made no sound on the concrete. I had learned how to walk on steel beams, hundreds of feet in the air without causing vibrations. I could cross a room without displacing the dust. I reached the washing machine and glanced at the screen. It was still unlocked, open to her messages. A notification banner dropped down from the top. Gym trainer, Marcus. The message read, "Is the old zombie asleep yet? I want you tonight. Ty does not have to know." My heart hammered against my ribs. Gym trainer, Marcus. The message was intimate, disrespectful, and damning. Not only was she stealing my money and my house, she was cheating on the husband who was destroying his soul to give her everything she wanted. Tyrone was a fool. A criminal, yes, but a fool. He had sold his father down the river for a woman who was laughing at him with another man. I reached inside my jacket and pulled out the Nokia brick. I had snapped a photo of the screen before the banner disappeared. The image was grainy but legible. Jim. Trainer Marcus asking for my daughter-in-law while my son was likely upstairs counting the money from my house. I slipped the Nokia back into my pocket and stepped back to the chair, sitting down just as Emily turned around. "Okay, Harrison," she said, grabbing her phone without checking it. "Stay put. I have to go edit this footage. Do not make any noise." She unlocked the door and went upstairs, leaving me in the semi-darkness again. I sat there listening to the click of the lock. The anger I felt was different now. It was not just about the house or the money. It was about the betrayal, the layers of it. She was using me to get sympathy, money from strangers. She was drugging me to keep me compliant, and she was betraying Tyrone while he betrayed me. It was a house of cards built on lies and greed, and I had just found the loose thread that could unravel the whole thing. I touched the pocket where the Nokia sat warm against my chest. I had the photo, I had the knowledge. Now I just needed the right moment to use it. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes, picturing the structural blueprints of a demolition. You do not just blow everything up at once. You weaken the supports, you drill the holes, you plant the charges, and then when everything is ready, you push the button. I was not just a prisoner in a basement anymore. I was the saboteur inside their walls, and they had no idea I was awake. I sat in the dark on the edge of the mattress and closed my eyes, letting the damp chill of the basement seep into my bones to keep me alert. In the silence of my confinement, my mind drifted back to 1984. I was not sitting in a cellar. Then I was standing on a windswept platform 40 stories above the streets of Chicago, holding a blueprint that would change the skyline. They called it the cold dampener system. It was a hydraulic counterweight mechanism designed to help skyscrapers sway against high winds without snapping. It was elegant, it was simple, and it was mine. I filed the patent 3 months later, followed by 2 more for seismic reinforcement and bridge pylons. Tyrone thinks I am a retired city worker living on a meager pension. He sees the rusted truck and the worn-out flannel shirts and assumes I am scraping by checking for coupons at the grocery store. He has no idea that every time a skyscraper in Tokyo survives a typhoon or a bridge in San Francisco withstands a tremor, a deposit is made into a blind trust in Delaware, $2 million a year, for 30 years. The money piled up quiet and unseen like silt at the bottom of a river. I never touched it. I lived off my salary because I wanted to teach my son the value of $1. I wanted him to build his own life. not stand on a pile of my cash and call himself tall. Now, as I sat in the prison he had built for me, I realized my mistake. I had hidden the money so well that he thought I was worthless. I had taught him that I was a man of small means, so he treated me with small respect. He did not know he had locked a multimillionaire in his basement. He did not know that the man he was planning to discard like trash could buy and sell him 10 times over before breakfast. The sound of the lock turning snapped me back to the present. The door swung open and light flooded the stairs, blinding me momentarily. Tyrone stomped down the steps, holding a bundle of fabric. He looked manic, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his tie loosened around his neck. He threw the bundle at me. It hit my chest with a dusty thud. "Put these on," he ordered, his voice tight with stress. I unfolded the clothes. It was a pair of stained sweatpants with a hole in the knee and a t-shirt that smelled of mildew and old sweat. They were rags, the kind of clothes you would find in a donation bin that had been rejected. Why, I asked, dropping them on the mattress. "Because Dr. Evans is coming at 4 o'clock, Tyrone said, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "He needs to see the decline. Pop, you need to look the part. You are not Harrison, Cole the engineer, anymore. You are Harrison, the senile old man who wets himself and forgets his own name." He stopped pacing and looked at me with disgust. He reached into his pocket and pulled out my wallet. It was an old leather bifold cracked at the spine, shaped to my hip from years of use. He flipped it open and pulled out the cash inside. $40. He laughed, a short barking sound that echoed off the concrete walls. $40. Pop, this is it. This is your whole life. A lifetime of working with your hands getting dirty, sweating in the sun, and this is what you have to show for it. He threw the bills on the floor as if they were contaminated. "You are pathetic," he spat. "You spent your whole life being careful, saving pennies, fixing your own roof. And look where it got you. You are broke, you are old, and you are in my basement wearing my cast-offs." I looked at the bills on the floor. I did not pick them up. I looked at my son standing there in his Italian suit that I knew he had bought on. Credit sneering at the $40 that I had earned with honest work. "You measure a man by his wallet, Tyrone," I said softly. "That is why you are empty." He stepped forward, his face twisting into a snarl. "Do not lecture me, old man. You do not get to lecture me. You are the failure here, not me. I am making moves. I am closing deals. I just sold a house for $500,000. What have you done lately besides drool?" He did not wait for an answer. He kicked the mattress, sending dust motes dancing into the light. "Put on the rags," he commanded. "If you are not wearing them when I come back down with the doctor, I will make you regret it, and do not try anything stupid. Evans is on my payroll. He sees what I pay him to see." He turned and stormed up the stairs, slamming the door and locking it with a heavy mechanical clack. I waited until his footsteps faded into the kitchen above. Then I stood up, I picked up the rags and folded them neatly, placing them on the chair. I would wear them later. I would play his game for now. But tonight the game would change. I went to the small window high on the wall. It was a narrow, rectangular opening meant for ventilation, covered by a metal grate and a layer of grime. Earlier that afternoon, while Emily was busy editing her video, I had used a loose nail I found behind the washing machine to work on the screws holding the grate in place. It had taken hours of patient, silent scraping. The screws were rusted, painted over layers of neglect, but rust has a yield point. I had applied torque, slowly, consistently, turning them a fraction of a millimeter at a time. I climbed up onto the washing machine, my boots finding purchase on the metal lid. I reached up and tested the grate. It was loose. I pushed gently and it swung outward, revealing a slice of the night sky and the overgrown bushes of the backyard. The opening was tight, maybe 14 inches high, but I was not a wide man. I took off my heavy jacket and pushed it through first. Then I hoisted myself up. I felt the rough concrete scrape against my ribs, a sharp pain that told me I was alive. I exhaled completely, collapsing my chest and wiggled through the opening. My shoulders scraping the sides, I tumbled out onto the damp earth, landing in the mulch behind the hydrangea bushes. The air smelled of wet grass and exhaust fumes. Freedom. I put my jacket back on, checking the pocket. The Nokia and the notebook were safe. I stayed low, moving through the shadows of the yard, avoiding the motion sensor lights. I knew where the blind spots were. I had analyzed the security system layout the moment I arrived. It was a cheap system installed by someone who cut corners just like everything else in Tyrone's life. I slipped through the side gate and walked 2 blocks before I dared to check my phone. I had a message from Jenkins. Meet me at the Waffle House parking lot off the highway midnight. It was a 20-minute walk. My legs ached, but my adrenaline was pumping, keeping the fatigue at bay. I pulled my collar up and pulled my head down, looking like just another homeless old man wandering the night. Tyrone was right about one thing. I looked the part. I saw Jenkins' truck parked in the far corner of the lot under a flickering street lamp. It was a battered Chevy, sturdy and dependable just like him. He was sitting in the driver's seat, smoking a cigarette, the cherry glowing in the dark. I opened the passenger door and climbed in. Jenkins looked me over, his eyes narrowing. "You look like hell." "Harrison," he grunted, taking a drag. "I feel like hell," I replied. "Where is it?" Jenkins reached under his seat and pulled out a heavy object wrapped in an oilcloth. He handed it to me. I unwrapped it. A snub nose, .38 special, cold steel fully loaded. It was legal, registered to Jenkins, but untraceable to me. "Do not use it unless you have to." Jenkins said, his voice grave. "This is not a war zone, Harrison." "It feels like one," I said, tucking the gun into the waistband of my pants at the small of my back. And the file Jenkins handed me, a thick manila envelope. I opened it under the dome light. My eyes scanned the documents, my engineer brain processing the data faster than I could read the words. It was a financial autopsy of my son. Tyrone was not just in debt, he was drowning. He had 3 mortgages on the Buckhead house. The last one was a high-interest loan from a private lender, the kind that breaks kneecaps for late fees. He had maxed out 11 credit cards. His trading accounts were empty, wiped out by a series of disastrous bets on cryptocurrency and volatile tech stocks. But the most damning document was at the bottom. A foreclosure notice from the bank dated 2 weeks ago. "He has 30 days, Harrison," Jenkins said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "The bank is taking his house. He is underwater on everything. The car, the furniture, the clothes, on his back. It is all leased or bought on credit." I stared at the paper. The numbers were red and angry. Tyrone owed nearly $2 million in total. The $450,000 from my house sale was not a windfall, it was a drop in the bucket. It would pay off the loan sharks, the Greeks he mentioned, but it would not save his house. "He needs more," I whispered, realizing the full scope of his desperation. "He needs everything," Jenkins confirmed. "He needs your pension. He needs your Social Security. He needs every asset you have just to keep the lights on for another 6 months. He is not trying to get rich, Harrison. He is trying to stay out of prison, or the morgue." I looked out the window at the highway, the cars rushing by, oblivious to the ruin sitting in this truck. My son was a failure, a man who had been given every opportunity, every advantage, and had squandered it all on an image, a hologram of success. "He thinks I am the burden," I said quietly. "He thinks I am the one dragging him down." Jenkins flicked his cigarette out the window, watching the sparks die on the asphalt. "He is desperate, Harrison, and desperate men are dangerous. You need to be careful if he finds out you have money, real money. He wanted to just put you in a basement. He will kill you for it." "I know," I said, touching the notebook inside my jacket. "I know." I looked at the foreclosure notice again. A plan began to form in my mind, a structural demolition. It required precision timing and absolute ruthlessness. "He needs money," I said, looking at Jenkins. "He is desperate for a lifeline." "Yeah," Jenkins said. So, I am going to give him one." I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "I am going to give him exactly what he wants, and it is going to crush him." I put the file back in the envelope and opened the door. "Take me back, Jenkins. Drop me a block away. I have to get back in before he wakes up." "You are going back there?" Jenkins asked, incredulous. "You are going back into the cage?" "I am not a prisoner anymore, Jenkins," I said, stepping out into the cool night air. "I am the Trojan horse." I walked back to the house, slipping through the shadows, my mind racing with calculations, load limits, stress points, failure modes. Tyrone wanted to play games with money. He wanted to treat people like assets and liabilities. Fine. I would show him what a real liability looked like. I would show him the cost of underestimating the man who built the foundation he was standing on. I climbed back through the window, squeezing my body through the grate, and dropped onto the washing machine. I replaced the grate, tightening the screws just enough to hold but loose enough to open again. I stripped off my jacket and hid the gun. the phone and the file inside the lining of the old sofa in the corner. I lay down on the mattress just as the sun began to paint the sky gray. I was exhausted, hungry, and my body screamed in protest. But I felt a strange calm. Tyrone was going to come down here in a few hours expecting to find a broken, confused old man. Instead, he was going to find a gold mine, and he was going to dig until he buried himself alive. The heavy deadbolt slid back with a metallic clack that echoed against the cinder block walls like a gunshot. I was already sitting up on the edge of the mattress, my hands resting on my knees, waiting. The morning light was just a gray suggestion filtering through the cracks in the ceiling, but down here, time was measured by the visits of my jailers. Tyrone stomped down the stairs, bringing with him the smell of expensive cologne and stale anxiety. He was wearing the same suit from yesterday, but it looked rumpled now as if he had slept in it, or had not slept at all. He carried a plastic bowl covered in cling wrap and a bottle of water. "Here, Pop," he muttered, not looking at me, placing the food on the washing machine. "Eat up. I have a busy day. I cannot be babysitting you." He turned to leave, his movements jerky and agitated. He was a man running out of time. The foreclosure notice I had seen last night was ticking away in his pocket, a time bomb he could not defuse. "Tyrone," I said. My voice was not the raspy, confused croak I had used for the camera yesterday. It was the deep, resonant baritone of a man who had commanded crews of 200 steelworkers. It was the voice of his father. He froze his hand, hovering over the handrail. He turned slowly, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What did you say?" he asked, squinting at me in the dim light. I said, "Look at me, son." I stood up slowly, unfolding my 6-foot frame to its full height. I did not stoop, I did not shake. I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of authority I possessed. Tyrone stepped back instinctively, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "You took your meds, right?" Emily said. "You took them. You are supposed to be calm." "I am calm, Tyrone. I am clearer than I have been in months." I took a step toward him. I saw his eyes dart to the door, wondering if he could make it up the stairs and lock me in again, but curiosity held him. Curiosity and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, I had something to say that could save him. I had a moment of clarity last night. I lied, my voice steady and convincing. Maybe it was the shock of the move, or maybe the fog just lifted for a minute. But I remembered something important. Tyrone crossed his arms, trying to regain his composure. "What are you talking about?" "Pop, go back to sleep. You are imagining things." "I am not imagining this," I said, leaning against the washing machine, casual, confident. I remembered the safety deposit box. Tyrone scoffed. "You do not have a safety deposit box." "Pop, we checked your accounts. We checked everything. You have a checking account with $2,000 and a pension that barely covers groceries. Do not waste my time. Not my box," I corrected him quietly. "Your mother's." The mention of Odette made him pause. He knew his mother was the one who handled the savings, the one who tucked money away in coffee cans and under mattresses, the one who planned for rainy days. "Mom," he asked, his voice losing its edge. "What about Mom? Before she got sick back in '92, she was worried about the economy. Remember the recession? She did not trust the banks with everything, so she bought government bonds, treasury bonds, bearer bonds, the kind that belong to whoever holds them." I watched his face carefully. I saw the wheels turning, the greed starting to wake up behind his eyes. "Bonds," he repeated. "How much?" I scratched my chin, pretending to think hard, digging through the haze of a memory that did not exist. She put them in a box at the old First National branch downtown, the one with the marble columns. I think there was about $500,000 worth back then, with interest. Well, you do the math. $500,000. The number hung in the damp air like a spell. Tyrone's mouth opened slightly. His breath hitched. I could practically hear his heart rate accelerating. $500,000 was exactly what he needed. It was enough to pay off the loan sharks, the Greeks enough to stall the foreclosure, and enough to keep up his facade for another year. He licked his lips, his eyes wide. "Are you sure, Pop? Are you sure it was 500,000? Nodded grave and serious. "That is why I never spent money." Tyrone. That was our nest egg. We were saving it for you for your future. But then Mom died and I could not bear to go down there and open that box. It hurt too much, so I left it, and then I forgot about it until last night. Tyrone grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight, desperate. This is real, Pop. Tell me this is real. Do not mess with me, it is real, son. I said, looking him in the eye, lying with the ease of a sociopath. It is sitting there waiting. But you know how those old boxes work. You need the physical key, and you need me to sign for it. Tyrone let go of me and spun around, pacing the small room, running his hands through his hair. He let out a breathless laugh, a sound of pure manic relief. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, this changes everything. 500 grand. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "Emily, get down here. Now," he shouted into the receiver. "No, do not ask questions. Just get down to the basement. Now." He hung up and looked at me with a new expression. It was not love. It was not respect. It was the look a starving man gives a piece of meat. I was valuable again. 2 minutes later, Emily came clattering down the stairs. She was wearing a silk sleep mask pushed up on her forehead and a look of sheer irritation. "What is it, Tyrone?" she snapped, pulling her robe tight. "It smells like mold down here. Why are you waking me up?" "Shut up and listen," Tyrone said, grabbing her arm. "Pop remembers something. He says Mom left a safety deposit box with bonds, $500,000 worth. Emily stopped complaining. Her eyes went wide, blinking rapidly as she processed the number. She looked from Tyrone to me, her expression shifting instantly from annoyance to predatory focus. $500,000, she breathed. Is he lying? Is he having an episode? He is lucid. Look at him. He remembers the bank. He remembers the year. It makes sense. Mom was always squirreling money away. Emily walked up to me, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive night cream. "Harrison," she said, her voice dropping into that fake sweet register she used for her videos. "Is this true? Is there really money?" "Yes, Emily," I said, playing the part of the weary old man trying to help his family. "It is there. I want you to have it. I do not need it anymore. Not down here." She squealed a high-pitched sound of delight and hugged Tyrone, jumping up and down. "We are saved," she cried. "We can pay the house. We can go to the Maldives." "Oh, Tyrone, I knew there was a reason we kept him like a stray dog. They had decided not to euthanize yet." Okay, Tyrone said, separating himself from her, trying to take charge. "We need to move fast. The bank opens at 9. We need to get that box today, before the Greeks call again." He turned to me, his face intense, focused. "Where is the key?" "Pop," you said. "We need a key. Where is it?" I hesitated, creating a moment of suspense. I rubbed my forehead as if trying to summon the memory through a fog of age. "The key," I muttered, closing my eyes. It was a small brass key. Mom kept it in a special place. She said it had to be somewhere nobody would look. Somewhere safe. Think. "Harrison," Emily urged her, nails digging into my arm. "Where is it? Is it in your wallet? We checked your wallet." "No, not in my wallet." I opened my eyes, looking at them with feigned sadness. She sewed it inside the lining of her favorite thing. She wanted to keep it close. "What thing?" Tyrone demanded, shaking me slightly. "What thing?" "Pop, the teddy bear," I said softly. That old tattered bear she kept on her bedside table. The one with the missing eye, Mr. Cubby. She sewed it into the stuffing of the stomach. The room went silent, deathly silent. Tyrone's face went pale, the blood draining out of it until he looked like a wax figure. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in horror. They looked at each other, and a silent scream passed between them. "Mr. Cubby," Tyrone whispered, his voice trembling. "Yeah," I said, innocent and oblivious it was on. "The nightstand when you guys moved me out. Did you bring it here? It should be in one of the boxes." Tyrone looked at Emily, panic rising in his chest like bile. "Emily," he choked out. "The boxes. The stuff from the bedroom. What did you do with the bear?" I don't know," Emily stammered, backing away. "I mean, it was old. It was dirty, Tyrone. It smelled like dust and sickness." "What did you do with it?" Tyrone roared, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her. "Did you pack it?" "No," she screamed, pushing him away. I threw it out. Okay, I threw it out yesterday. It was garbage. It was a gross old toy. Why would I keep that? You threw it out. Tyrone screamed, his voice cracking. You threw out $500,000. I threw out everything, Emily yelled back, hysterical. You told me to clear the house, Tyrone. You said get rid of the junk. We rented the dumpster. Remember? The big orange one. The dumpster. Tyrone spun around and looked at me. Horror written all over his face. Pop the dumpster in the driveway. Is it still there? Did they pick it up yet? I shrugged. Calm as a frozen lake. I do not know, son. You were the one who ordered the crew. I think the schedule said pickup was this morning. This morning. Tyrone checked his watch. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sanitation trucks usually came at 7. Oh, God. Tyrone gasped, clutching his chest. He looked like he was having a heart attack. We have to go. We have to go right now. He grabbed Emily's hand, dragging her toward the stairs. Move, move, he shouted, pushing her up the steps. But I am not dressed, Emily wailed. I am in my pajamas. I do not care, Tyrone screamed. Get in the car. We are going to the dump. We are going to the house. We have to find that bear. They scrambled up the stairs, tripping over each other in their greed and panic. I heard them running through the kitchen keys, jingling, a door slamming, and then the roar of the BMW engine peeling out of the driveway. I stood alone in the basement, listening to the silence return. They were gone. They were driving across town, breaking every speed limit to go dive into a dumpster filled with the debris of the life they had destroyed. They were going to dig through trash, through broken glass, through the memories they had discarded, looking for a stuffed bear that did not exist. There was no key. There were no bonds. There was only a lie. I had planted in their minds a seed of greed that had bloomed instantly. I walked over to the washing machine and picked up the bottle of water Tyrone had left. I took a long drink, enjoying the cool liquid. They would be gone for hours. The dump was massive, and if the truck had already come, they would have to chase it down, possibly all the way to the municipal landfill. They would be knee-deep in filth, fighting rats and seagulls looking for a phantom fortune, and while they were gone, the house was mine. I went to the door. It was locked from the outside, of course, but that was not a problem anymore. I had analyzed the hinges yesterday. They were external hinges. Cheap, contractor grade, meant for interior doors. Putting a hollow core door on a security perimeter was a mistake only an amateur would make. I took the spoon from the oatmeal bowl. It was flimsy metal, but the pin in the hinge was loose. I worked the handle of the spoon under the head of the pin and tapped it upward with the heel of my boot. 1 pin. 2 pins. 3. The door sagged in the frame. I pulled it gently from the handle side and it swung open backward, leaving the locked side engaged, but the doorway clear. I stepped out into the kitchen. The house was quiet. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked like a normal home, a happy home. But I knew better. I walked to the living room and found the liquor cabinet. Tyrone had a bottle of wine sitting on the counter, a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon opened but barely touched, worth probably $200. I poured myself a glass. I sat down in Tyrone's leather recliner, put my feet up on the ottoman, and took a sip. It was good, rich and oaky. I took out my Nokia and dialed Jenkins. They are gone, I said when he answered. They are chasing ghosts at the landfill. Good, Jenkins chuckled. You have the run of the place. I do, I said, looking around the room. And Jenkins? Yeah, I need you to call the bank, not my bank, the one that holds the mortgage on Tyrone's house. Tell them you are an interested buyer and you heard the property might be coming up for distressed sale. Ask them about the foreclosure timeline. You are going to squeeze him, Jenkins asked. I am going to crush him, I said, taking another sip of wine. But first, I am going to let him swim in garbage for a few hours. He needs the exercise. I hung up and settled back into the chair, enjoying the silence. Tyrone and Emily were out there right now, tearing apart garbage bags, ruining their expensive clothes, screaming at each other, accusing each other of throwing away their future. They thought they were hunting for treasure. They did not know that the real demolition had just begun. The silence in the house was a luxury I had not afforded myself in years. It was not the quiet of loneliness which I had known since Odette passed. It was the quiet of ownership. I sat in Tyrone's Italian leather recliner, the one he forbade me from touching because he said my work clothes would stain it. I had my feet propped up on the ottoman boots and all crossing my ankles with the deliberate slowness of a man who has nowhere to be. The bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon stood open on the side table, breathing, letting its notes of dark cherry and oak fill the air. I poured a generous glass and held it up to the morning light, watching the deep red liquid swirl. It was a $200 bottle bought with money. Tyrone did not have to impress people he did not like. Now it was fueling the man he was trying to bury. I took a sip, letting the tannins coat my tongue. It tasted like justice. I picked up the remote and turned on the massive, flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. I did not care what was on. I just wanted the noise, the normalcy of it. I found a documentary about the construction of the Hoover Dam, concrete pouring load distribution, the sheer will of men conquering nature. It was comforting. But while my eyes watched the dam rise, my mind was 20 miles away, at the municipal landfill. I did not need a security camera to see what was happening. I could visualize it with the precision of an engineer calculating a structural failure. I closed my eyes and pictured them. Tyrone in his $3,000 suit, now stained with leachate and grease, scrambling over mountains of black garbage bags. The heat at the landfill would be rising by now, baking the stench of rotting food, dirty diapers and decomposing organic matter into the air. It was a smell that stuck to you, a smell that entered your pores and refused to leave. I imagined Emily, her Manolo Blahniks, sinking into the sludge, her manicured nails clawing, through torn plastic searching for a teddy bear that had ceased to exist 24 hours ago. They would be screaming at each other, blaming one another for the loss of the fortune, Tyrone cursing her for throwing away the bear, Emily screeching that she did not know. They were two rats in a maze chasing the smell of cheese, ignoring the trap, snapping shut behind them. I took another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. This was not cruelty, it was education. They needed to learn the value of $1, and there is no better teacher than digging through filth for a phantom fortune. They thought they were hunting for $500,000. In reality, they were hunting for their own dignity, and they were not going to find it. I checked my watch. It had been 4 hours. The drive to the dump was 40 minutes. The intake line would have been long, then they would have had to bribe or beg the site manager to let them search the active dumping ground. That meant they had been knee-deep in trash for at least 2 hours. They would be exhausted, dehydrated, and desperate. They would be reaching the breaking point. I poured another glass of wine and waited. The documentary shifted to the installation of the turbines, massive steel beasts designed to generate power. I felt a kinship with them. I was generating power too, silent and unseen, waiting to release the current. Around noon, I heard the rumble of the BMW engine in the driveway. It did not sound smooth and arrogant like it usually did. It sounded rough, hurried. The car door slammed with a violence that shook the front window. Then a second slam. I did not move. I stayed in the recliner, my glass in hand, my eyes fixed on the television screen. The front door flew open, banging against the wall. The smell hit me before they did. It was a wave of sour milk decay and hot garbage rolling into the air-conditioned sanctuary of the living room. Tyrone stood in the entryway. He was unrecognizable. His suit jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was torn at the shoulder and stained brown and gray. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was matted with sweat and grime. Dirt streaked across his face like war paint. He was panting, his chest heaving, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Behind him, Emily looked like a broken doll. Her floral dress was ruined, ripped at the hem and covered in mud. She was holding one of her shoes. The heel snapped off. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black rivers mixing with the dirt. She was shivering despite the heat. They stared at me. They stared at the old man they had locked in the basement, sitting in the master of the house chair, drinking their wine, watching their TV. Harrison. Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "You are out." I turned my head slowly, looking them up and down with an expression of mild distaste. "You two smell terrible," I said calmly, taking a sip of wine. "Did you find Mr. Cubby?" Tyrone let out a roar, a sound that was half human, half animal. He charged across the room, ignoring the kiwi expensive rug he was ruining with his boots. "You old son of a bitch," he screamed, lunging for me. He grabbed the lapels of my flannel shirt and yanked me forward, spilling a few drops of wine on his own floor. His grip was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. "Where is it?" He spat, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of bile. "Where is the money? You lied to us." "There was no bear. We tore apart half the landfill. There was nothing." I did not flinch. I did not pull away. I looked him dead in the eye, my gaze steady as a laser level. I did not lie. "Tyrone," I said, my voice low, cold. "I told you where it was. You are the ones who threw it away." He shook me, his fingers digging into my chest. "It was not there," he yelled. "We checked every bag. We checked every box. It is gone." "Then it is gone," I said, shrugging as best I could in his grip. "That is a shame. $500,000. Gone because Emily did not like the smell of dust." Emily let out a wail from the doorway, dropping her broken shoe. "You did this on purpose," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You knew. You knew. We threw it out. You sent us there to humiliate us." I looked past Tyrone at her. "I sent you there to find your inheritance," I said. "You are the ones who turned it into garbage." Tyrone shoved me back into the chair hard. The wine glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, a red stain spreading across the beige carpet like blood. "I ought to kill you right here," he breathed, his hands clenching into fists. "I ought to finish what we started." "Do it," I challenged him, raising my chin. "Do it, Tyrone. But if you kill me, you definitely do not get the money." He froze, his fist hovering in the air. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dropping. I brushed the wrinkles from my shirt, smoothing the fabric. "I said if I die, the money stays lost." Tyrone lowered his hand, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "You said the bonds were in the bear. You said we lost them." I sighed, leaning back in the chair, looking weary, looking like an old man whose memory was a flickering candle. "I might have been mistaken," I murmured, rubbing my temple. "It is so hard to think sometimes." The fog comes and goes. Tyrone grabbed my arm again, but less violently this time, desperation replacing the rage. "What do you mean, mistaken, Harrison? Think. Think hard." I closed my eyes, pretending to strain against the dementia they claimed I had. "The bear," I said slowly. "The bear was where Odette kept the key. But the bonds are not in the bear." "Where are they?" Tyrone demanded, shaking my arm. "Where are the bonds?" I opened my eyes, looking up at him with a sudden clarity. "The bank," I said. "The First National downtown. The box is still there. The bonds are inside the vault. They never leave the bank." "Tyrone, you know that." He stared at me, processing this. His face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, relief, and then renewed anger. "But the key," he said, his voice tight. "You said we needed the key." "We do," I said, nodding. "Or rather, we did." Tyrone ran a hand through his dirty hair, leaving streaks of grime on his forehead. "What are you talking about?" "Stop speaking in riddles, old man. If the key is lost," I said, speaking slowly as if to a child, "I can go to the bank in person. I can sign an affidavit of loss. They will drill the lock. It costs $100, but they will open it." "If I am there?" "If you are there," Tyrone repeated. "Yes," I said, "but I have to be there physically with my ID, and I have to sign the papers." Tyrone looked at Emily. She had stopped crying and was watching us, her eyes wide with greed, the dollar signs flashing behind her pupils again. "He has to go to the bank," she whispered, stepping into the room, ignoring the filth on her dress. "He has to sign." Tyrone looked back at me, calculating, measuring. "You are going to do that for us?" he asked, suspicious. I looked at the stain on the carpet, then at the wreckage of my son standing before me. "I want to help you, Tyrone," I said, lying with the ease of a lifetime. "I do not want you to lose this house. I do not want you to be in debt. The money is no good to me. I am an old man. I just want peace." "Peace," Tyrone scoffed. "You want peace. Fine. We get the money, we pay off the house, and you get peace. You can live here in the basement forever if you want." He pulled me up from the chair, his grip firm but no longer violent. "Get up," he ordered. "We are going to the bank." Now I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Look at you. You look like you rolled in a sewer. You cannot walk into a bank like that." Tyrone looked down at his clothes, realizing for the first time the state he was in. He smelled the stench clinging to him. "We have to shower," Emily said, wrinkling her nose. We cannot go anywhere like this. Fine, Tyrone snapped. Fast. 10 minutes. Wash up, change clothes, and meet me in the car. He turned to me, pointing a dirty finger in my face. You sit right there. Do not move. If you try to run, I will catch you, and if I have to chase you, I will break your legs. Understand? I understand, son, I said, meekly sitting back. Down. Tyrone grabbed Emily's arm and dragged her toward the stairs, leaving a trail of muddy footprints on the hardwood. Go, he shouted. Move. I listened to them run up the stairs, heard the slam of bathroom doors and the rush of water in the pipes. They were scrubbing their bodies, trying to wash away the smell of their failure, but they could not wash away the greed. I sat in the chair and smiled. They were taking the bait. They were going to clean themselves up, put on fresh suits, and drive me right into the heart of the city. They thought they were driving me to sign over a fortune. They thought they were taking a senile old man to open a box full of government bonds. They did not know that the box was empty. They did not know that the only thing waiting for them at the bank was the truth. And they certainly did not know that I had already called ahead. I reached into the cushion of the chair where I had tucked the Nokia while they were upstairs. I sent a single text message to Ross Package. Is in transit. ETA 45 minutes. Prepare the reception. I put the phone back and folded my hands in my lap, waiting. The smell of the landfill still hung heavy in the room, masking the scent of the expensive wine, but to me, it smelled like victory. Tyrone was going to drive me to the bank. He was going to walk me into the vault, and he was going to watch me open that box. And when he saw what was inside, when he realized that the game was over, I was going to be the one laughing. I closed my eyes and listened to the shower running upstairs. Scrub hard, son, I thought. You are never going to get clean from this. The BMW tore down the highway, weaving through traffic with a recklessness that made my stomach turn. Tyrone was driving like a man possessed, his knuckles white on the leather steering wheel, his eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. He was sweating again, despite the shower. The moisture beading on his forehead and dripping down his temple. Speed limits were just suggestions to him now. He was racing against a clock that only he could hear the ticking of the loan shark's patience running out. I sat in the passenger seat perfectly still. My hands rested on my knees, calm and steady. In the back seat, Emily leaned forward, her breath hot against my neck. I could smell the fear on her. It smelled like sour milk beneath her floral perfume. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pressure against my side, right between my ribs. I looked down. Emily was holding a small fruit paring knife she must have grabbed from the kitchen counter. The blade was short, but sharp enough to puncture a lung. "Do not say a word to anyone," she hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of terror and malice. "If you try to signal for help, if you try to tell the bank tellers anything, I will stick this right into you. I swear to God. Harrison, I will do it." I looked at the knife. Then I turned my head slowly to look at her. She was pale, her eyes wide and manic, the pupils dilated. She looked like a cornered rat, baring its teeth. "You will not do anything, Emily," I said, my voice low and even. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "Try me," she spat, pressing the point harder against my jacket, pushing through the thick fabric until I felt the prick against my skin. "We have lost everything. We have nothing left to lose." "You have $500,000 to lose," I replied, not flinching. "If you stab me, I bleed out in the car or in the bank lobby. Either way I die, and if I die, I cannot sign the papers. If I cannot sign the papers, the box stays locked, the bonds stay in the vault, and you and Tyrone stay broke." The logic hit her like a physical blow. Her hand wavered. She knew I was right. She needed me alive and functional at least for the next hour. After that, I knew my life expectancy would drop significantly, but right now I was the most valuable object in the car. Tyrone glanced over, seeing the knife. Emily put it away. He snapped his eyes, returning to the road. "Do not damage the merchandise. We need him walking and talking. Just keep him quiet. I am not the one screaming," I said, looking out the window at the passing city skyline. The skyscrapers I had helped build rose up like steel sentinels watching my progress. I felt a strange sense of peace. I was entering the final phase of the demolition. The charges were set. The perimeter was clear. All that was left was to trigger the collapse. We pulled up to the First National Bank downtown. It was a massive building of gray stone and marble with tall pillars that spoke of old money and stability. It was the kind of place that intimidated people like Tyrone, people who lived on credit and hype, but to me it was just another structure, another load-bearing problem to be solved. Tyrone parked the car in a loading zone, ignoring the signs. "Get out," he ordered, rushing to my side and gripping my arm like a vice. "Keep your mouth shut, smile and get us to the box." Emily flanked my other side, her hand in her pocket, clutching the knife, her other hand gripping my elbow. We looked like a family helping a frail grandfather, but the pressure of their fingers told a different story. We walked through the revolving doors and into the cool, hushed atmosphere of the lobby. The air conditioning hit me first, crisp and clean, scrubbing away the smell of the landfill. The lobby was expansive with high ceilings and polished marble floors that clicked under Tyrone's dress shoes. Security guards stood by the doors looking bored but alert. Tyrone marched me toward the front desk, his posture aggressive. "I need to access a safety deposit box," he told the young woman at the counter. "My father is the account holder. We are in a hurry." The woman looked at Tyrone's disheveled appearance, his cheap suit trying to look expensive, and then she looked at me. In my worn flannel shirt and work boots, I looked like the maintenance man. But before she could answer, a door opened behind the counter, and a tall man in an immaculate navy suit stepped out. It was Mr. Sterling, the branch manager Ross had called him 2 hours ago. "Mr. Cole," the manager said, his voice booming across the quiet lobby. A smile spread across his face, genuine and warm. "It is wonderful to see you again, sir. We have been expecting you." Tyrone froze. He looked from the manager to me and back again, confusion warping his features. "You know him?" Tyrone asked, his voice cracking. "Know him." Mr. Sterling laughed, walking around the counter to shake my hand. "Harrison is one of our oldest and most valued clients. He designed the reinforcement grid for our main vault back in the 80s. This building literally stands because of your father." Tyrone. His mouth fell open. He stared at me as if seeing a ghost. He thought I was a nobody, a broke engineer living on pennies. He had no idea I was a legend in this building. "Mr. Cole," the manager continued, ignoring Tyrone and focusing entirely on me. Mr. Ross called ahead. He said you needed to access your private box immediately. "We have prepared the room for you. Would you like some coffee water?" "No, thank you, Arthur," I said, using his first name, throwing Tyrone off balance even further. "I just need to get this done. My son is in a bit of a rush." "Of course," Arthur said, gesturing toward the heavy steel gate that led to the vault area. "Right this way." We walked toward the gate. Tyrone and Emily tried to follow, stepping close to my heels like shadows. "I am sorry," Arthur said, stepping in front of Tyrone, holding up a hand. "Access to the vault is restricted to the account holder only." "What?" Tyrone spluttered, indignation rising in his chest. "I am his son. I have power of attorney. I am afraid that does not matter, sir," Arthur said, his voice turning cold and professional. "Bank policy. The box is in Mr. Cole's name alone. Unless he has explicitly added you to the signature card, which he has not, you cannot enter the vault. You will have to wait in the lobby." "But he is old," Tyrone argued, desperate sweat beading on his upper lip. "He forgets things. He needs help with the key I do not have." "I do." "The key, remember," I interrupted, looking at Tyrone. My voice was calm, steady. "I have to sign the affidavit for the drill. Remember?" Tyrone looked trapped. He looked at the heavy steel gate, then at the armed guard standing next to it. He realized he could not bully his way past. He looked at me, his eyes pleading and threatening at the same time. "Do not mess this up, Pop," he hissed, leaning close so only I could hear. "You get those bonds and you bring them out here. If you try anything funny, Emily is waiting right here, and we know where you sleep." I nodded slowly, playing the part of the obedient cowed father. "I understand." Arthur swiped his badge and the gate clicked open. I stepped through, leaving my son and his wife on the other side of the bars. They looked like prisoners already trapped in their own greed and desperation, watching the only thing that could save them walk away. I followed Arthur down the long corridor lined with brass boxes. The air was cool and smelled of paper and dust. It was the smell of money. Arthur stopped at a small private room, a viewing room with a table and a single chair. "Here we are, Harrison," Arthur said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key box, 402. As Mr. Ross instructed, we moved it here for you. It is empty, of course. Thank you, Arthur, I said, taking the key. You are a good man. Take your time. He nodded and closed the door, leaving me alone. I sat down in the chair and placed the metal box on the table. It was long and narrow, cold to the touch. My hands were not shaking. Not anymore. I felt a supreme clarity. I opened the lid. It was empty, just as I knew it would be. There were no bonds. There was no fortune inside this tin box. The fortune was in the trust fund, safe and untouchable. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. I had prepared it the night before, writing it by the light of the moon in the basement. It was a single sheet of notebook paper folded twice. I unfolded it and placed it inside the empty metal box in bold black ink. I had written 5 words. I am the buyer. I stared at the words for a moment. The ink looked blacker than night. It was the punchline to the joke they did not know they were telling. It was the revelation that would shatter their reality. Tyrone thought he had sold my house to a stranger, an investor, a faceless corporation. He thought he had outsmarted me. He did not know that the LLC that bought the house was mine. He did not know that the $450,000 he had received was my money. Money I had paid to buy back my own property. I was the buyer. I closed the lid of the box with a satisfying snap. I left the paper inside, waiting for the moment when the truth would come out, when the police would open this box as evidence. They would find my note, a confession of victory. I stood up and smoothed my flannel shirt. I checked my reflection in the polished metal of the box. I looked tired, old, worn down, but my eyes were bright. They were the eyes of a man who had just won a war without firing a shot. I walked out of the viewing room, leaving the box on the table. Done already? Arthur asked, waiting in the hall. Done, I said. The transfer is authorized. I walked back down the corridor toward the gate. Tyrone and Emily were pressing their faces against the bars like zoo animals, their eyes scanning my hands, looking for the bonds. I held up my empty hands, palms open. Tyrone's face fell. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. Where is it? He shouted as I stepped through the gate. Where is the money? I stopped in front of him, keeping my voice low so the guard would not react. It is electronic, son, I said. Calm and reasonable. These are government bonds, Tyrone. You do not just carry them out in a sack like a bank robber. I signed the release forms. The bank is liquidating them. The money will be wired. Wired, Tyrone repeated, blinking stupidly. Wired. Where? To the account on file, I said. To my account. Your account, Emily screeched, drawing stares from the tellers. Why your account? Because it is my money. Emily, I said, looking her up and down, letting my gaze linger on the mud stains on her dress. It goes to me, and then I transfer it to you. That is how it works. How long? Tyrone asked, grabbing my shoulder, his grip painful. How long will it take? 24 hours, I lied. Standard banking procedure. It will be there tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, Tyrone released me, running a hand over his face. Tomorrow is too late. The Greeks said today. They said noon. Then tell them it is coming, I said, shrugging. Tell them the wire is pending. Show them the deposit slip if you have to, but that is the best I can do. Tyrone looked at me, searching for a lie, searching for a trap. But I was an engineer. I knew how to build a facade that could withstand a hurricane. He saw only a tired old man who had done what he was told. Fine, he spat. Fine. We go home. We wait. But you are staying in the basement, Pop. And if that money is not there by 9 a.m. tomorrow, I am going to tear this whole city apart. I nodded meekly. I understand. Let us go, Emily hissed, grabbing my arm again. Let us get out of here. We walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun. They dragged me toward the car, thinking they were dragging a prisoner back to his cell. They did not know that the wire transfer was never coming. They did not know that the only thing arriving tomorrow morning was a squad of FBI agents and a foreclosure notice. I got into the car and buckled my seatbelt. Drive safely. Son, I said, closing my eyes. I would hate for anything to happen to us now that we are so close. Tyrone slammed the car into gear and peeled away from the curb. I smiled internally, listening to the engine roar. The demolition was complete. Now I just had to watch the dust settle. The drive back to the house was a blur of aggressive lane changes and terrified silence inside the cabin of the BMW. Tyrone drove like a man running from a fire, his eyes fixed on the road with a manic intensity that made the veins in his neck bulge against his collar. Emily sat in the back seat chewing on her thumbnail until it bled, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route that did not exist. I sat in the passenger seat, calm and collected, watching the city pass by. My hands were folded in my lap, resting easily. I was the eye of the storm, the only steady point in their collapsing world. When we screeched into the driveway, Tyrone did not even turn off the engine before he was out of the car. He ran around to my side and yanked the door open, grabbing my arm with a grip that bruised. "Get inside," he snarled, dragging me up the steps. "Get inside and make the transfer." Emily followed close behind, stumbling in her heels, her face a mask of panic. We burst into the house, the cool air conditioning offering no relief from the heat of Tyrone's desperation. He pushed me toward the kitchen island where his laptop sat open and glowing. "Do it now," he shouted, slamming his hand on the marble counter. "Log and transfer the money. I want to see the confirmation screen." I moved slowly, deliberately, irritating him with every second I wasted. I pulled out the chair and sat down, adjusting my flannel shirt. I looked at the screen, then up at him. "I cannot transfer it instantly, Tyrone," I said, my voice steady and reasonable. "You know how large transactions work. It is $500,000. The bank has security protocols. They have to verify the source of funds and the destination account." Tyrone's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He leaned over me, his breath smelling of stale coffee and fear. "Do not give me that bureaucratic garbage. Pop, you said 24 hours. You said it would be there tomorrow morning." "It will," I lied, smoothing my hair back. "The transfer is initiated, but it has to clear the federal clearinghouse. It takes time." "Tyrone, it is out of my hands." He slammed his fist onto the counter, making the fruit bowl jump. "You better not be playing me, old man. If that money is not in my account by noon tomorrow, I am going to lose my mind. Do you understand? I am going to lose everything I understand." "Son," I said quietly, "I did what I could. The rest is up to the banking system." He stared at me, searching for deception, searching for a crack in my facade, but I was reinforced. Concrete, I gave him nothing but the weary expression of a father trying to help. His screw-up son. He groaned, a sound of pure frustration, and turned away, raking his hands through his hair. Just then, his phone began to ring. It was not a normal ringtone. It was a jarring, high-pitched alarm sound he had assigned to a specific contact. The color drained from his face instantly, leaving him looking gray and sickly. He stared at the phone on the counter as if it were a bomb counting down. "Answer it," Emily whispered from the doorway, her voice trembling. "Answer it, Tyrone, or they will come here." Tyrone reached out with a shaking hand and tapped the speaker icon. "Yeah," he said, his voice cracking. "Where is my money, Tyrone?" A voice boomed from the speaker, deep and gravelly, with a thick accent that sounded like it had been forged in a basement. It was the voice of a man who broke bones for a living. "I am getting it," Tyrone stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I swear, Tony. It is coming. The transfer is pending." "Pending." The voice laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I do not pay my bills with pending. Tyrone, I pay with cash. You said you sold the house. You said you had the $450. I do." "I did," Tyrone yelled, desperate. "I sold it. The money is there. It is just locked up. Locked up." The voice dropped an octave, becoming deadly quiet. "You are lying to me, Tyrone. I checked the public records. The sale went through yesterday. The funds were released. Why is my money locked up?" "I do not know," Tyrone cried, checking his laptop, frantically opening his own banking app. "There is a hold. I see the deposit, but it says pending investigation. I do not know why." I watched from my chair, sipping the glass of water I had poured for myself. I knew exactly why I had instructed Ross to flag the transaction as suspicious immediately after I sent the money from my shell company. I had frozen the funds on my end, trapping Tyrone in a financial limbo. "Listen to me, little man," the voice on the phone growled. "You have until midnight, not tomorrow morning, not noon, midnight. If I do not see 200,000 in my crypto wallet by 12 a.m., I am sending the boys over. And they are not coming to talk. They are coming to take a piece of you. Literally. Tony." Please, Tyrone begged, tears streaming down his dirty face. I need 24 hours. My dad just signed over some bonds, $500,000. It is coming. I swear. I do not care about your dad or his bonds. Midnight, Tyrone, or I chop off your hands and use them to open your safe myself. The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Tyrone stood there staring at the phone, his chest heaving. He looked like a man who had just heard his own death sentence. Midnight, he whispered. Midnight, he turned to his computer, typing furiously, clicking refresh over and over again on his banking screen. Come on, he screamed at the monitor. Come on, clear, you stupid money. But the screen remained unchanged, pending investigation. The words mocked him in bright red letters. The $450,000 from the house sale was visible but untouchable. It was a mirage, water in the desert that he could not drink. He spun around and looked at me, his eyes wild. Call the bank, he shouted. Call them and tell them to release the hold. It is your sale, Pop. You were the seller. Tell them it is legitimate. I cannot call them now. Tyrone, I said calmly, looking at the clock on the microwave. It is 5:30. The main office is closed. The fraud department does not open until 9 a.m. No, Tyrone roared, sweeping the fruit bowl off the counter. It crashed to the floor, apples and oranges rolling everywhere. No. He fell to his knees in the middle of the kitchen, pulling at his hair, sobbing. It was a pathetic sight. A grown man brought to his knees, not by grief but by greed. Emily stood in the doorway watching him. Her face was pale, but her eyes were calculating. She was looking at Tyrone like he was a piece of meat that had gone bad. She looked at the clock, then at the back door. I am leaving, she said softly. Tyrone stopped sobbing and looked up at her, confusion clouding his tear-filled eyes. What? He asked. I am leaving, Tyrone, she said, her voice gaining strength. She walked into the living room and grabbed her purse, the expensive one she had bought with my money. She started stuffing things into it, her phone, her car keys, a handful of cash from the jar on the counter. You cannot leave. Tyrone scrambled to his feet, stumbling over his own feet. We are in this together. Em, we are a team. Not anymore, we are not. She spat, not looking at him. Tony said, Midnight, Tyrone. Did you hear him? He said, he is going to chop you up. I am not staying here to watch that. I am not going to let them hurt me. Because you are a gambling addict. She ran to the front door, grabbing her coat. Emily, wait. Tyrone chased after her, grabbing her arm. You cannot do this. You spent the money too. You wanted the house. You wanted the lifestyle. You are just as guilty as I am. I did not gamble away $200,000. She screamed, spinning around to face him, trying to wrench her arm free. I did not lie to the loan sharks. Let me go, Tyrone. I am going to my sister's. No, you are not. Tyrone shouted, his grip tightening until she winced. You are staying right here. We are going to fix this. There is no fixing this, she yelled, scratching at his hand with her manicured nails. It is over. You are dead, Tyrone, and I am not dying with you. I am filing for divorce. The word hung in the air. Divorce? Something snapped in Tyrone. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a blind, white-hot rage. He pulled her back hard, spinning her around. You ungrateful little witch, he growled. He raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound was loud, crisp, echoing through the high-ceilinged hallway. Emily stumbled back, holding her cheek, shock written all over her face. She stared at him for a second, then she lunged at him, screaming, clawing at his eyes. They fell to the floor, a tangle of limbs and expensive clothing, wrestling like animals. Tyrone was shouting obscenities. Emily was screeching. I sat at the kitchen island watching them. My son and the woman he chose tearing each other apart on the floor of the home they had stolen from me. It was a scene of utter degradation. The veneer of their high-class life had been stripped away, revealing the rot underneath. Stop it, I said, my voice booming over their noise. They froze, panting, tangled together on the rug. Look at you, I said, standing up, walking over to them. You are pathetic, both of you. Tyrone looked up at me, a line of blood trickling from a scratch on his cheek. Help us, Pop, he whispered, desperate again. Help us fix this. I cannot fix you. Tyrone, I said, looking down at him. I can build skyscrapers, I can reinforce bridges, but I cannot fix a soul that is broken by greed. Emily scrambled away from him, grabbing her purse and running for the door. This time, Tyrone did not stop her. She threw the door open and vanished into the night, leaving the door wide open. Tyrone lay on the floor, staring at the open door, defeated. "She is gone," he whispered. "She really left me." "She was never with you, son," I said, closing the door and locking it. "She was with the money, and the money is gone." Tyrone sat up, burying his face in his hands. He began to weep, loud, racking sobs that shook his shoulders. "I am dead, Pop," he cried. "Tony is going to kill me midnight. It is over." I looked at the clock. It was 6 p.m. 6 hours until the deadline. 6 hours until the reckoning. I walked back to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I took a sip, my hand steady. "Get up, Tyrone," I said. He looked at me, his eyes swollen. "Why?" he asked. "Because if you are going to die tonight, you are going to do it. Standing." "Up," I said. "And because we have work to do." "What work?" he sniffled. "We are going to find you a way out," I lied. "But you have to do exactly what I say. No questions, no arguments. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly, desperate for any lifeline. "Yes, Pop, anything. Just tell me what to do." I smiled internally. The trap was set, the bait was taken. Now it was time to close the jaws. "Go wash your face," I ordered. "We are going to make a call, but first you are going to give me the phone." He handed me his phone without hesitation, trusting me completely because he had no one else left to trust. I took it and looked at the screen. The battery was low, but it was enough. I had the evidence, I had the confession, and now I had the leverage. "Go," I said, pointing to the bathroom. He shuffled away, a broken man walking to his execution. I waited until the bathroom door closed. Then I dialed a number on his phone. Not the bank, not the police. I dialed Ross. "It is time," I said when he answered. "The house of cards has fallen. Bring the hammer." I hung up and sat in the chair, waiting for my son to return, waiting for the end of the world to arrive at his doorstep. The sun had set hours ago, plunging the kitchen into a gloom that the overhead recessed lighting could not dispel. The air conditioner hummed a low mechanical drone that did nothing to cool the feverish heat radiating from my son. Tyrone was pacing back and forth in front of the kitchen island, his shoes squeaking on the tile, his hands running through his hair in a repetitive, maddening gesture. He looked like a man whose soul was being eaten from the inside out. The digital clock on the microwave read 7:15 p.m. The deadline with the loan sharks was less than 5 hours away. I sat at the kitchen table nursing the glass of water I had poured earlier, watching him unravel. It was a study in structural failure, stress fractures appearing in the facade until the whole thing was ready to collapse. Suddenly, Tyrone stopped pacing. He turned to me, his eyes wide and unseeing, glazed over with a toxic mix of panic and adrenaline. He marched over to the junk drawer, the one where Emily kept the takeout menus and loose batteries. He yanked it open, the contents spilling onto the floor. He rummaged through the mess until he found what he was looking for, a roll of heavy-duty gray duct tape. He stormed over to me, ripping a long strip off the roll with a violent tearing sound. "Put your hands on the arms of the chair," he ordered, his voice trembling. I looked at him, calm and unmoving. "Tyrone, what are you doing?" "Do it!" he screamed, lunging forward and grabbing my left wrist. He slammed it against the wooden armrest of the chair and wrapped the tape around it tight enough to cut off circulation. He did the same with my right wrist, then my ankles, securing me to the heavy oak furniture. I did not fight him. I could have snapped his nose with a headbutt or kicked his knee backward until it shattered, but I needed him to commit. I needed him to go all the way to the point of no return. So I let him bind me. I let him turn his father into a hostage in his own home. When he was done, he stepped back, breathing hard. He reached into the back of his waistband and pulled out a gun. It was a small, cheap pistol, a Saturday night special, matte black and ugly. It looked like something he had bought from a trunk in a dark alleyway, the kind of weapon that misfired as often as it shot. He leveled it at my head, his hand shaking so badly the barrel wavered in the air. "Transfer the money," he snarled, spit flying from his lips, landing on my cheek. "Do it now, Harrison. Tell me the password. Tell me the codes." I looked at the gun, then at his face. I saw the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I saw the teenager I had taught to drive. I saw the man who was now ready to blow my brains out for a ledger entry. "You do not want to do this, son," I said, my voice steady. deep, resonant in the quiet kitchen. "Put the gun down. I will kill you," Tyrone shouted, pressing the cold metal circle against the center of my forehead. "I swear to God. Pop, I will paint this kitchen with your brains. If you do not give me that money, Tony is going to kill me anyway. I have nothing to lose. Give me the money." The pressure of the gun was a physical weight, a cold, hard point of contact. I calculated the angle. If he pulled the trigger, the bullet would pass through my frontal lobe, severing the connections that made me who I was. It would be quick, a sudden darkness. But I looked into his eyes and I saw fear, not resolve. He was a coward, a greedy, desperate coward, and cowards do not pull the trigger unless they have no other choice. I chuckled. It started low in my chest, a rumble of genuine amusement that worked its way up my throat until I was laughing loud and hard, shaking the chair I was taped to. Tyrone pulled the gun back an inch, confusion warring with his rage. "What is so funny?" he screamed hysterically. "Why are you laughing? You are going to die." I stopped laughing and looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of the authority I had earned over 70 years of hard living. "You want to know where the money is, Tyrone?" I asked, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You want to know where the $450,000 from the house sale went?" He stared at me, the gun trembling. "Yes. Where is it? Is it in the trust? Is it in the bonds?" "It is in my pocket," I said, smiling coldly. "It has always been in my pocket." Tyrone blinked, his brow furrowing, the gun lowered slightly. "What are you talking about? You are tied up. You do not have $500,000 in your pocket." I sighed, leaning my head back against the chair. "I am the buyer, Tyrone," I said, the words hanging in the air like smoke. "I am Shadow Ridge Holdings, LLC. The company that bought the house. The investors you thought were offering you a cash deal. That was me. That was my money." Tyrone froze. His brain tried to process the information, tried to fit this new piece into the puzzle of his reality. "You," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, that is impossible. You are broke. You are a retired engineer." "I am a retired engineer who owns 3 patents on hydraulic dampening systems used in every major skyscraper built in the last 20 years. I said, my voice hard as granite. "I make $2 million a year in royalties, Tyrone. I have made $2 million a year since you were in diapers. I hid it because I wanted you to make your own way. I wanted you to be a man, not a trust fund baby." He stepped back, the gun dropping to his side, his mouth hanging open. "You have millions," he gasped. "You have millions, and you let me struggle. You let me drown. I let you live." I corrected him. "I gave you a roof. I gave you an education. I gave you a start. And what did you do with it? You gambled it away. You bought cars you could not afford and suits to impress people who do not care if you live or die. And when you got into trouble, instead of coming to me like a man, you tried to steal my home. You tried to put me in a basement. You tried to drug me. I did what I had to do." Tyrone shouted, his voice cracking defensive. "I was desperate." "And I knew you were desperate," I said. "That is why I set the trap. I knew you were going to sell the house. I had Jenkins watching you. I had Ross set up the shell company. I authorized the purchase. I bought my own house back from you, Tyrone, with my own money, just to see how far you would go, just to see if you would actually sign the papers." Tyrone looked at the laptop on the counter, where the banking screen still showed the pending transaction. "So the money is real?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. "You sent the money." It is there, I confirmed, nodding. "But here is the thing about that money." "Tyrone," I leaned forward, straining against the duct tape, my eyes locking onto his. "You sold a house that you did not own," I said. "You used a power of attorney that was signed under duress based on a fraudulent medical diagnosis that makes the sale invalid, that makes the contract void, and that makes the transaction wire fraud." Tyrone's face went pale, the color draining away until he looked like a ghost. "Wire fraud," he whispered. "Federal wire fraud," I clarified. "And because I knew you were going to do it, I called the FBI this morning before we went to the bank. I told them everything. I told them about the loan sharks. I told them about the forgery. and I told them I was about to transfer $450,000 into your account as part of a sting operation. I paused, letting the weight of my words crush him. That money, Tyrone, the money sitting in your account right now, it is marked, it is federal evidence. The moment it hit your ledger, the trap snapped shut. You did not just rob your father, you accepted proceeds from a criminal enterprise monitored by the United States government. You are holding dirty money, son, and the people coming to collect it are not loan sharks, they are federal agents. The gun slipped from Tyrone's fingers. It hit the tile floor with a loud clatter, a useless piece of metal. Tyrone stumbled back, his legs giving out. He collapsed against the refrigerator, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. The FBI, he moaned, rocking back and forth. You called the FBI on your own son. You stopped being my son the night you locked me in the cellar, I said, my voice devoid of pity. You became a criminal, and criminals go to jail. But Tony Tyrone looked up, tears streaming down his face, terror distorting his features. Tony is going to kill me if I do not pay him by midnight. He is going to cut me up. I looked at the clock. It was 7:30 p.m. You better hope the police get here before Tony does, I said calmly, because a jail cell is the safest place in the world for you right now. Tyrone stared at me, a look of pure betrayal in his eyes. How could you? He whispered. How could you do this to me? I did not do this to you, Tyrone, I said, closing my eyes, tired, suddenly exhausted by the weight of the victory. You did this. To yourself. I just let you hold the shovel. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Tyrone weeping on the floor. I sat there taped to the chair, waiting for the sirens, waiting for the end of the world. My heart heavy, but my conscience clear. I had built a life on solid foundations. My son had built his on sand, and the tide had finally come in. The silence in the kitchen stretched tight like a rubber band about to snap. Tyrone was still huddled on the floor, rocking back and forth, muttering to himself about midnight and deadlines and broken legs. I sat taped to the heavy oak chair, watching the digital clock on the microwave count down the seconds. The air conditioner hummed a low, indifferent drone, masking the sound of vehicles approaching from the street. I knew they were coming. Ross was a man of his word, and he knew the federal banking laws better than anyone. When I authorized that transfer from a shell company to a personal account flagged for suspicious activity, it triggered alarms that rang straight in the offices of the FBI. It was not just a property dispute anymore. It was wire fraud involving significant sums across state lines. It was the kind of crime that brought out the heavy artillery. Suddenly, the front yard exploded with light. Blue and red strobes cut through the darkness, flashing against the kitchen windows like a disco strobe in a nightmare. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker outside, magnified and terrifying. Federal agents. This is the FBI. Come out with your hands up. Tyrone froze mid-rock. His eyes went wide, and for a second a look of pure relief washed over his face. He thought it was the police coming to save him from the loan sharks. He thought the cavalry had arrived to put him in a holding cell, safe from Tony's knife. Thank God, he whispered, scrambling to his feet, stumbling over his own exhaustion. It is the cops. Pop. It is the cops. He started to run toward the front door, his hands waving. I am here, he screamed. I am in here. Help me! He did not get the chance to open the door. There was a deafening boom, a concussive blast that shook the floorboards beneath my feet. The heavy front door, the one Emily had picked out for its aesthetic appeal rather than its security, splintered inward as a battering ram hit it with thousands of pounds of force. Wood flew like shrapnel. Glass shattered. The foyer filled with smoke and the heavy thud of boots. Freeze. Federal agents. Get on the ground. Men in body armor swarmed into the house carrying assault rifles with blinding tactical lights. They moved with the precision of a machine, flowing from room to room, clearing corners, shouting commands. Tyrone stood in the hallway, paralyzed by the violence of the entry. He had expected a patrol car and a polite knock. He got a SWAT team. Get down, a voice roared. Tyrone raised his hand, shielding his eyes from the lights. Do not shoot. It is my dad. He is the one who... A black-gloved hand grabbed Tyrone by the back of his expensive ruined shirt and slammed him into the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He slid down the plaster, leaving a smudge of dirt and sweat, clear, kitchen clear. An agent entered the kitchen, his rifle raised. He saw me taped to the chair, the duct tape gleaming under his flashlight beam. Hostage secured, the agent shouted into his radio. Medical, get in here. 2 agents moved toward me, knives out. They sliced through the tape, binding my wrists and ankles with practiced efficiency. The circulation rushed back into my hands, painful and hot. I rubbed my wrists, looking at the chaos destroying my son's perfect home. They dragged Tyrone into the kitchen, forcing him face down on the tile floor. One agent pressed a knee into his back while another zip-tied his hands behind him. "You have the right to remain silent." An agent recited the words, mechanical and cold. I stood up, my legs shaky but holding. The agent who had cut me loose offered me a hand. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked, looking at the red marks on my skin. "Do you need a paramedic?" "I am fine," I said, my voice raspy. "I just want to see my son." I walked over to where Tyrone lay pinned to the floor. His face was pressed against the cold ceramic, his eyes wild and rolling. He looked up and saw me standing over him, free and untouched, while he was in chains. "You!" he screamed, spitting blood from a split lip. "You did this! You set me up!" I looked down at him, feeling a profound hollowness where my heart used to be. "I did not set you up, Tyrone," I said softly. "I just called the authorities. You set yourself up the moment you tried to sell a house that did not belong to you. It was a trap," he wailed, struggling against the zip ties. "The money. It was a trap. It was a test," I corrected him. "And you failed. Search him," the lead agent ordered. An agent began to pat Tyrone down, checking his pockets and waistband. He pulled out the wallet, the keys, and then his hand stopped at the back of Tyrone's pants. "Weapon," the agent shouted. He pulled out the cheap matte black pistol Tyrone had threatened me with. He cleared the chamber, a single bullet clattering onto the floor. It spun like a coin before coming to rest near my boot. "Gun secured," the agent said, bagging it. Then he reached into the inside pocket of Tyrone's suit jacket. He pulled out a small, clear plastic bag filled with white powder. "We have narcotics," the agent said, holding the bag up to the light. "Looks like cocaine." Tyrone's eyes bulged. "No, that is not mine. I mean, it is just for stress. I do not deal. It is personal use, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, possession of a controlled substance, wire fraud, elder abuse." The lead agent listed the charges, ticking them off like items on a grocery receipt. "You are looking at 20 years minimum, son." Tyrone began to sob. It was not the crying of a man who was sorry. It was the crying of a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar and realized the jar was full of scorpions. "Pop, please," he begged, looking up at me, snot running from his nose. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I am your son." I looked at the gun in the evidence bag. The gun he had pressed against my forehead not an hour ago. I looked at the drugs that explained his erratic behavior and his desperate need for cash. I looked at the man who had thrown my wife's records onto the lawn and locked me in a dark basement. "I do not have a son," I said, my voice hard as granite. "My son died a long time ago. You are just the thief who broke into his house." "Take him away," the lead agent ordered. 2 agents hauled Tyrone to his feet. He was dead weight, his legs dragging as they marched him out the front door, past the shattered frame and into the flashing lights of the night. The neighbors were all out on their lawns, watching the spectacle, witnessing the downfall of the arrogance that had plagued their street. I watched him go and felt nothing. No joy, no sadness. Just the cold satisfaction of a structural equation balancing out to zero while Tyrone was being shoved into the back of a federal transport van 30 miles south at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Another scene was unfolding. Emily stood in the security line for international departures. She was wearing large sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, trying to look like just another tourist heading to the islands. She had booked a one-way ticket to Miami with a connecting flight to the Cayman Islands using a credit card she had opened in my name months ago. She tapped her foot nervously, checking her phone every 10 seconds. She had seen the news alerts about police activity in Buckhead. She knew the house of cards was falling, and she had run, leaving her husband to be crushed by the debris. She reached the front of the line and handed her passport to the TSA agent. Her hand was trembling slightly. "Heading somewhere warm?" the agent asked, looking at her boarding pass. "Yes," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Vacation needed a break." The agent nodded and waved her through toward the scanners. She placed her carry-on bag, a Louis Vuitton roller on the belt, and walked through the metal detector. She held her breath, waiting for the beep. Silence. She exhaled a sigh of relief. She was going to make it. She was going to get away. Ma. She froze, a TS. A supervisor was standing by the monitor, looking at the X-ray image of her bag. He signaled to two uniformed police officers standing near the checkpoint. "Is this your bag, Ma?" The supervisor asked, pointing to the monitor. "Yes," Emily said, her voice rising in pitch. "Why? What is wrong?" "Please step this way," the officer said, stepping in front of her, blocking her path toward the gates. "I have a flight to catch." Emily snapped, her entitlement flaring up even in the face of danger. "I do not have time for this. Step this way." "Now," the officer repeated, his hand resting on his belt. They led her to a side table. The supervisor unzipped the bag. Emily watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, tucked between layers of silk underwear and designer swimwear, was a heavy velvet pouch. The supervisor opened the pouch and poured the contents onto the table. Diamonds, emeralds, rubies, gold. It was a treasure trove. Odette's jewelry collection. The pieces I had given my wife over 40 years of marriage, the necklace from our honeymoon, the bracelet from Tyrone. Birth, the ring from our 25th anniversary. All of it stolen from my bedroom while I was locked in the basement. "That is mine." Emily lied quickly. "It is family heirlooms. My grandmother gave them to me." "Is your grandmother's name?" "Odette Cole," the officer asked, holding up a gold locket engraved with the name Emily S. Mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "We have a report of grand larceny from the Atlanta PD regarding these specific items," the officer said, pulling out his handcuffs. "No," Emily shrieked, backing away. "No, you do not understand. My father-in-law gave them to me. He is confused. He forgot. We have video surveillance from the pawn shops where you tried to sell 2 of the rings yesterday, the officer said, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, possession of stolen property, and flight to avoid prosecution." Emily screamed, a high, piercing sound that made heads turn all over the terminal. "Tyrone," she yelled as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "Tyrone, help me. Call the lawyer." But Tyrone was not there. Tyrone was in the back of a van heading to a federal holding cell. As the officers marched her away past the staring crowds, Emily saw her reflection in the glass of a duty-free shop. She saw a woman who had thought she was untouchable, a woman who thought beauty and youth were currencies that could buy anything. Now she was just another criminal in handcuffs, dragging a bag full of memories she had tried to pawn for a plane ticket. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I pulled it out, standing in the ruins of my kitchen. Package 2 secured. Ross text read. I looked around the empty house. The silence was back, but this time it was not oppressive. It was clean. It was the silence of a job well done. I walked out the front door, past the broken wood and the police tape. I did not look back. I walked down the driveway to where the agents were wrapping up their work. "Mr. Cole," the lead agent said, approaching me, "we need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. We can give you a ride." I looked at the black SUV waiting at the curb. Then I looked down the street. "No, thank you," I said. "I have my own ride." I walked past the SUV to the end of the block where a battered Ford F-150 was idling in the shadows. Jenkins was behind the wheel. I climbed into the passenger seat. The truck smelled of old coffee and sawdust. It smelled like home. "Did you get them?" Jenkins asked, shifting into gear. "We got them all," I said, leaning my head back against the seat. Jenkins nodded and pulled away, driving slowly through the quiet streets. "Where to?" he asked. "Take me to a hotel," I said. "I need a shower. And then I need to call a contractor. I have a porch to have a rebuild." The heavy steel doors of the Federal Detention Center slammed shut behind me with a sound that signaled finality. It was a sound I had become accustomed to lately, first in my own basement and now here 40 miles outside of Atlanta. The air inside the facility smelled of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies, a scent that clung to the back of your throat and refused to let go. I walked down the long gray corridor guided by a guard who looked too young to carry a weapon. I was 70 years old, wearing my best Sunday suit and holding a cane. I did not really need, using it more as a prop of dignity than a tool for walking. I walked with my head high, my eyes focused straight ahead. I was not here to visit a relative. I was here to inspect the wreckage of a life I had once built. Then I saw him. On the other side of the thick plexiglass partition sat a man I barely recognized. Tyrone looked 20 years older than the last time I saw him, being shoved into the police van. The arrogant stockbroker in the tailored Italian suit was gone. In his place was a shivering, gaunt figure in a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His head was shaved, revealing the shape of his skull, making him look vulnerable and hard at the same time. His eyes, usually bright with schemes, were sunken and dark-rimmed red from lack of sleep, or perhaps from crying. He was fidgeting, picking at his cuticles, his leg bouncing under the metal table in a nervous rhythm that vibrated through the floor to where I stood. He picked up the black phone receiver the moment I sat down. His hands were shaking violently, causing the heavy cord to sway. I picked up my side slowly, deliberately. The plastic felt greasy against my ear, warm from the last inmate who had sat here begging for salvation. "Pop," he breathed, his voice cracking through the static. "Pop, thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a nightmare in here. The guys in my cell block, they know who I am. They saw the news stories. They call me patricide. They think I killed you. They beat me up. Pop. Look." He turned his head to the side to show me a purple bruise blooming behind his ear, spreading down his neck. I looked at it without flinching. I assessed the damage like I would assess a crack in a retaining wall. Superficial, unsightly, but structurally sound. "You look terrible, Tyrone," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth he was searching for. "I know I look terrible," he hissed, leaning closer to the glass, his breath fogging the surface. "That is why you need to help me. I talked to my public defender. He says, the bail is set at $100,000 because I am a flight risk and because of the gun charge. But you have that kind of money, Pop. I know you do. The feds told me everything during the interrogation. They told me about the patents. They told me about the trust fund in Delaware. They told me you are the one who bought the house back." He paused, licking his dry lips, his eyes wide, with a mixture of awe and resentment. "You played me, Pop. You played me like a fiddle. You had millions all this time, and you let me stress about mortgage payments. You let me get involved with Tony. You watched me drown when you could have saved me with a check. You let me humiliate myself digging through a landfill for a bear that did not exist." I leaned forward, my reflection merging with his face in the glass. "I watched you drown, Tyrone, because you were the one who poked holes in the boat," I said. "You gambled away your life, you signed your name to debts you could not pay. And when the water got high, you did not ask for a life jacket. You tried to use my body as a raft. But I can fix it," Tyrone interrupted, desperate sweat beading on his forehead. "If you bail me out, I can fight this," the lawyer says. "If I cooperate, if I testify against Tony and the document forger, maybe I can get a deal, but I cannot do it from in here, Pop. I need to be out to prepare my defense. I need a real lawyer, not this public defender hack. You have the money. You can hire the best criminal defense team in the state. You can save me. You owe me that much for setting me up." I looked at my son, the man who had been a baby in my arms, the boy I had taught to fish, the teenager I had taught to drive. I looked for a spark of the person he used to be, but all I saw was a desperate criminal trying to run one last con, trying to manipulate the one person he had already destroyed. "I have the money," I said slowly, letting the words sink in. "I could pay your bail today. I could hire a team of lawyers that would make the district attorney head spin. I could probably get you reduced to probation if I threw enough cash at the problem. I have enough money to buy this entire prison block." Tyrone hope flared in his eyes, bright and pathetic. "So you will do it. You will help me. You are going to get me out." "No," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy as a tombstone. "Why?" He whispered, the hope dying instantly. "Why not? You are my father." "No, I am not," I replied, my voice steady. "I was your father when you were growing up. I was your father when I paid for your college. I was your father when I helped you with the down payment on your first house. But that man died. Tyrone, he died 3 weeks ago." Tyrone looked confused, shaking his head. "What are you talking about? You are sitting right there. You are alive." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried all the weight of my pain. "He died the night you forced him out of his own home. He died when you shoved him into a damp basement and locked the door. He died when you fed him sedatives to make him crazy so you could steal his life. You killed him, Tyrone. You buried him under that house just as surely as if you had put a bullet in his head. The man sitting in front of you right now is not your father. I am just the victim who survived. I am the witness to your crime." Tyrone recoiled as if I had slapped him. Tears began to stream down his face. Real tears this time. Tears of a man realizing he had burned the burned. Only bridge that mattered. "Pop, please," he sobbed, placing his hand against the glass snot running from his nose. "I am sorry. I was scared. I was desperate. I love you. Do not leave me in here. Do not let me die in here." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, loud and harsh. I adjusted my jacket, smoothing the lapels. I looked down at him one last time. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel hate. I just felt a profound hollowness, a space where my son used to be. "You made your bed, Tyrone," I said. "Now you have to sleep in it. And unlike the bed you gave me, yours comes with a toilet." I hung up the receiver. It clattered into the cradle, cutting off his sobbing. I turned my back on him and walked toward the heavy steel door. I could hear him screaming my name, pounding his fists against the glass, muffled and distant muffled, like the sound of a man buried alive. I signaled the guard to open the door. I walked out into the sunlight of the parking lot, taking a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I had lost a son, but I had regained my life, and that was a trade I was finally willing to accept. The courtroom was a theater of the absurd, and Emily was giving the performance of her life. She sat on the witness stand dressed in a conservative navy blue cardigan and a knee-length skirt that she would never have been caught dead wearing a month ago. Her hair, usually styled in loose beach waves for her social media followers, was pulled back into a severe bun. She wore no makeup, leaving her face pale and drawn, emphasizing the dark circles she had carefully cultivated. She looked like a nun. She looked like a victim. She looked nothing like the woman who had laughed while locking me in a damp basement. I sat in the back row of the gallery, my hands resting on the handle of my cane. I was the silent observer, the ghost at the banquet. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Sterling, with eyes like flint, was walking Emily through her testimony. Emily had cut a deal, or at least she thought she had. In exchange for leniency, she had agreed to testify against Tyrone, painting him as the mastermind, and herself as the battered, coerced wife who had no choice but to go along with his schemes. "It was Tyrone," she sobbed into a tissue, dabbing at dry eyes. "He controlled everything. He had a temper. You saw the gun the police found. That was his. He used to wave it around the house, threatening me, saying if I did not help him get his father's money, he would hurt me and Harrison. I was terrified. I just wanted to protect Harrison. I watched her lie with the same ease she used to apply filters to her photos. She was throwing her husband, the man she had promised to love and cherish, directly into the wood chipper to save her own skin. She told the jury about the forgery, claiming Tyrone had practiced my signature for weeks while forcing her to watch. She told them about the drugs, claiming Tyrone forced her to hide them in the pantry. She even blamed him for the sale of the house, saying she had begged him not to do it. "I did not know what to do," she whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. "I was a prisoner in my own home, just like Harrison." The jury looked sympathetic. I saw a few heads nodding. They saw a young white woman crying about a violent husband, and their instincts kicked in. They wanted to save her. They wanted to believe her. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile that did not reach my eyes. Emily did not know that I had met with Ms. Sterling 2 days ago. I had walked into the district attorney's office and placed my old Nokia phone on her desk. I had played her the audio from the basement. I had shown her the photos of the text messages from the gym trainer, and I had given her the video of Emily mocking me while I pretended to be demented. Ms. Sterling stood up to cross-examine Emily. She walked slowly toward the stand holding a tablet. The sympathy in the room was thick, but Ms. Sterling was about to bring a sledgehammer to the glass house Emily had built. "Mrs. Cole." Ms. Sterling began, her voice deceptively calm. "You claim you were terrified of your husband. You claim you were coerced into mistreating Mr. Harrison Cole because you feared for your life. Is that correct?" "Yes," Emily sniffled. "I was so scared. And you claim you had no agency in the financial decisions, that you were just a bystander." "Yes. Tyrone handled all the money." Ms. Sterling nodded, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to submit new evidence to the court, Exhibit G and Exhibit H. The bailiff took the tablet and connected it to the large monitors facing the jury. Emily frowned, confusion flickering behind her tears. She did not know what was coming. She thought the only evidence was what the police had found during the raid. Miss Sterling pressed play. The courtroom filled with the sound of Emilia's voice, clear and bright. It was the audio from the video she had recorded for her social media, the one where she asked for donations. But then the video cut to the raw footage, the parts she had edited out. The screen showed Emily standing in the basement looking at her phone while I sat in the background slumped in the chair. That was perfect, she muttered on the screen, a smirk playing on her lips. We just made $2,000 in 10 minutes. Keep being crazy, Harrison. It pays the bills. The jury gasped. The sympathetic nods vanished instantly. Emily's face went white. She gripped the railing of the witness box, her knuckles turning ivory. That Ms. Sterling said. Pausing for effect was not the voice of a terrified woman. That was the voice of a woman calculating her profits. But let us continue. She swiped the screen. A photo appeared. It was the picture I had taken of her phone screen. The notification from Marcus, the gym trainer. Is the old zombie asleep yet? I want you tonight. Ty does not have to know. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Emily looked like she was going to be sick. She stared at the screen, the evidence of her infidelity and her cruelty looming large and high. Definition. So, Ms. Sterling continued, her voice hardening. Mrs. Cole, you were not terrified of your husband. You were cheating on him, and you referred to your father-in-law, the man you claim you wanted to protect, as an old zombie. I can explain, Emily stammered, standing up, her chair scraping loudly. It was just a joke. I was stressed. Tyrone made me sit down. Mrs. Cole, the judge barked his gavel, banging against the wood. Ms. Sterling was not done. She played one final clip, the audio I had recorded from the vent the night they put me in the basement. We can leave him down there with a timed feeder for all I care. Emily's voice sneered through the speakers. We deserve this money, Tyrone. I want that trip to the Maldives. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy and suffocating. It was the silence of a truth so ugly it sucked the air out of the room. You were not a victim, Mrs. Cole, Ms. Sterling said, closing her case. You were an accomplice. You were a co-conspirator. And in many ways you were the architect of this abuse. You dehumanized a 70-year-old man for likes and cash. You cheated on your husband while helping him commit fraud. And when the walls closed in, you tried to sell your victim's dead wife's jewelry to buy a plane ticket. Emily looked at the jury. Desperation clawed at her throat. She looked for the sympathy she had seen minutes ago, but it was gone, replaced by disgust. She looked at me. Harrison, she wailed, stretching her hand out toward the gallery. Tell them I took care of you. I brought you food. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. I looked her in the eye across the crowded room. You brought me poison. Emily, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the court. You fed me sedatives and called it care. You are not a victim. You are a predator who got caught. The judge sentenced her 3 days later. The plea deal she had hoped for was shredded. The prosecutor pursued maximum penalties, citing the aggravating factors of elder abuse and the calculated nature of the crimes. Emily stood before the bench, stripped of her dignity, stripped of her lies. The judge, an older woman who had no patience for those who preyed on the vulnerable, looked over her glasses at the sobbing woman Emily Cole. You have displayed a shocking lack of empathy and a level of greed that is frankly disturbing. The judge said, You viewed your father-in-law not as a human being but as a resource to be exploited. You manipulated the public, you betrayed your family, and you attempted to flee justice. Please, Emily begged, her voice a thin reed. I am sorry. I will pay it back. I will do community service. You will pay it back, the judge agreed. You will pay it back with time. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison for the charges of grand larceny, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and elder abuse. You are immediately remanded to custody. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Emily screamed. It was a primal sound of denial. 2 bailiffs moved in, grabbing her arms. She struggled, her heels skidding on the floor, just as she had struggled when Tyrone dragged her to the basement to look for the money she thought was there. No, she shrieked, looking back at me as they hauled her away. Harrison, please. You can stop this. You have money. You can hire a lawyer. I watched her go, her face contorted in ugly panic. I thought about the days she spent filming me in the basement mocking my feigned confusion. I thought about the way she looked at my furniture, my clothes, my life with utter contempt. I could stop it. I could have hired the best defense team in the state. I could have claimed. I was confused that I had given her permission, but I did not. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, the tap of my cane on the marble floor marking the rhythm of my exit. Emily wanted a life of luxury. She wanted to be taken care of. Now she would have a roof over her head, 3 meals a day, and a structured routine for the next 8 years. It was not the Maldives, but it was exactly what she deserved. The sound of a hammer striking wood echoed through the neighborhood. It was a sharp rhythmic sound, the sound of construction, the sound of progress. It was music to my ears. I stood on the front lawn of my house, my hands on my hips, watching the crew work. They were not the rough, careless movers Tyrone had hired to gut my life. These were union men, skilled carpenters and masons. I had hired them myself using the contacts I had built over 40 years in the industry. They treated the wood with respect. They measured twice and cut once. They built things to last. I had moved back in 3 days ago, immediately after the police released the crime scene tape. The house smelled of stale air and violation. The floors were scuffed from the boots of the movers and the police. The walls still held the echoes of that terrible night when I was dragged out in handcuffs. Most men would have sold it. Most men would have taken the money and moved to a condo in Florida trying to outrun the memory, but I am not most men. I am an engineer. When a foundation is solid, you do not abandon the structure just because the windows are broken. You repair it. You reinforce it. You make it stronger than it was before. I walked up the new steps of the porch. The wood was fresh, smelling of cedar and sap. I ran my hand along the railing, checking the sanding. It was smooth, perfect. I had ordered them to tear down the old railing, the one the movers had smashed. I did not want to patch it. I wanted it new. I wanted to erase every single mark Tyrone and Emily had left on this property. Inside the house was a hive of activity. Painters were rolling a fresh coat of warm cream paint over the walls, covering the scuffs and the shadows I had ordered. The carpets ripped out, exposing the original hardwood underneath. I hired a specialist to refinish the floors until they gleamed like honey in the sunlight. I walked into the kitchen. The cabinets where Emily had rifled through my things looking for money were gone. I replaced them with solid oak. My kitchen would never again be a place of fear or hunger. It would be a place of sustenance. I went to the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs looking down into the dark hole where my son had imprisoned me. It still smelled damp. It still felt cold. I could have sealed it up. I could have walled off the door and pretended it did not exist. But that would be hiding. I walked down the stairs, my boots heavy on the treads. I turned on the light. The lumpy mattress was gone. The cardboard box table was gone. The bucket was gone. It was just an empty concrete room. I am turning this into a wine cellar. I told the contractor who was standing behind me. I want climate control, cedar racks, and proper lighting. He nodded, jotting it down. You got it. Mr. Cole. I wanted to reclaim the space. I wanted to fill that room with things that aged well, with things that gained value over time, unlike my relationship with my son. I wanted to walk down here and pick out a bottle of Merlot, not sit in the dark waiting for a tray of drugged oatmeal. By the end of the month, the house was finished. It did not look like the house Odette and I had lived in. It looked better. It looked like the home of a man who had survived a storm and come out the other side standing tall. I bought new furniture, leather armchairs that smelled of success, a dining table made of reclaimed walnut, and a sound system that could play my jazz records with crystal clarity. I sat in the living room listening to Coltrane play a saxophone solo that sounded like a prayer. I looked around. There were no pictures of Tyrone. The photos of his graduation, his wedding, his childhood birthdays were gone. I had burned them in the backyard, fire pit, watching the faces curl and blacken into ash. It was a funeral rite, a final goodbye to the boy who had died long before he went to prison. The doorbell rang. It was a Friday evening, 6 months after the arrest. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. I walked to the door and opened. Walked to it. Mr. Jenkins stood there wearing a button-down shirt and slacks, holding a bottle of bourbon. You clean up nice, Jenkins, I said, stepping aside to let him in. You do not look so bad yourself, Harrison, he grunted, handing me the bottle. Behind him, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The driver opened the door and Ross stepped out. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, but his smile was genuine. He carried a briefcase in one hand and a box of cigars in the other. "Gentlemen," I said, "welcome." We sat in the dining room under the warm glow of the new chandelier. The table was set for 3. I had cooked the meal myself: roast beef, garlic, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, and homemade cornbread. It was a meal. Odette used to make a meal that tasted of comfort and history. We ate and we talked. We did not talk about Tyrone. We did not talk about Emily or the trial or the prison sentences. That was old news. That was debris. We had already cleared away. We talked about baseball. We talked about the changing skyline of Atlanta. We talked about the old days when a handshake meant something and loyalty was not a currency to be traded. Ross wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and leaned back in his chair. He looked at me, his sharp eyes softening. "You know, Harrison," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "we need to discuss the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant in the trust fund." I nodded. I knew this was coming. The patents were still generating revenue, the house sale money. The $450,000 I had used to trap Tyrone had been returned to me after the investigation concluded. My net worth was substantial, and I was a 70-year-old man with no heirs. The state froze Tyrone's assets. Ross continued. "We recovered almost everything he stole, the pension payments, the unauthorized withdrawals. It is all back in your account. Plus, with the market upticks, your portfolio is looking very healthy. So the question is, my friend, what do you want to do with it? You cannot take it with you." I looked at Jenkins. He was nursing his bourbon, watching me. He knew what it was like to be alone. He knew the weight of a legacy that had nowhere to go. "I have been thinking about that," I said. I looked around the room at the wealth I had accumulated, the wealth that had almost gotten me killed. "It is funny, Ross. For 40 years I saved every penny for Tyrone. I thought I was building a future for him. But money is like water. It takes the shape of the container you pour it into. Tyrone was a sieve. It just poured right through him. "So what is the plan?" Ross asked. "Do you want to travel? Buy a boat?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "I am too old for boats, and I have seen enough of the world." "I want to build something, Ross, but not a building. I want to build a foundation." "A foundation?" Ross asked, raising an eyebrow. "I want to start the Odette Cole Scholarship for Structural Engineering." I said the words feeling right in my mouth, full and heavy. "I want to find kids like me, kids from the neighborhoods in South Atlanta who have brains but no money, kids who look at a bridge and see the math, not just the concrete. I want to pay for their tuition, their books, their housing. I want to give them the start I never had." Ross smiled. It was a slow, wide smile. "That is a lot of money, Harrison. We are talking about a perpetual endowment." "Do it," I said firmly. "Draft the papers. I want the first recipient selected by next fall, and I want one condition." "Name it." "They have to take a class on ethics." I said, "My son knew how to count money, but he did not know what it was worth. I want these kids to know the difference." "Done," Ross said, raising his glass. "To the Odette Cole Scholarship," to Odette, Jenkins added, raising his bourbon. "To the future," I said, clinking my glass against theirs. We sat there for hours telling stories, laughing, drinking the good wine. It was the best dinner I had had in years. It was a dinner with family, not the family you are born with, but the family you choose. The family that stands by you when the walls are falling down. Later that night, after Ross and Jenkins had left, I stood in the hallway looking at the control panel for the new security system. It was state-of-the-art. Biometric scanners, motion sensors, reinforced locks. It was a fortress. I tapped the screen, bringing up the camera feeds. I could see the front porch, the driveway, the backyard, the perimeter. Every angle was covered in high-definition night vision. I saw a car drive slowly past the house, slowing down, then speeding up. It was just a neighbor, but my instincts flared for a second. Then I relaxed. The system was active. The perimeter was secure. I touched the screen, looking at the empty driveway where Tyrone used to park his BMW, where Emily used to pose for her photos. It was empty now, just clean concrete and moonlight. "No one comes in," I whispered to the empty hallway. "No one comes in unless I open the door. Not friends, not neighbors, and definitely not family. I turned off the panel and walked to the kitchen. I poured the last of the wine into my glass and walked out onto the back porch. The air was cool and the stars were bright pinpricks of light in the velvet darkness. I sat in my rocking chair, the wood creaking softly underneath me. I took a sip of wine, tasting the dark fruit and the earth. It tasted like freedom. I was 70 years old. I had no wife. I had no son. I was alone in a big house filled with expensive furniture. People would look at me and see a sad old man, a victim, a tragedy. But as I rocked back and forth, listening to the wind rustle the leaves of the oak trees, I did not feel sad. I felt heavy. Yes, heavy with the knowledge of what people are capable of. But I also felt light, light with the burden of lies removed. I had faced the worst betrayal a father can face, and I had survived. I had dismantled the trap and caught the hunters. I had rebuilt my home on my own terms. I raised my glass to the moon. "Here is to you, Harrison," I said softly. "You are still standing, and in the silence of the night, surrounded by the fortress I had built, I finally found the peace I had been looking for. It was a solitary peace, a quiet peace, but it was mine, and no one was ever going to take it from me again." My journey taught me that blood does not guarantee loyalty. We spend our lives building homes, careers, and families, but the strongest foundation must always be our own self-worth. I learned that saying no to toxicity, even when it shares your last name, is the ultimate act of self-love. You cannot save people who are determined to drown, and you certainly shouldn't let them use you as an anchor. True peace comes when you stop sacrificing your dignity to keep others warm. I lost a son, but I regained my life, and that is a victory worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven Tyrone, or did he get exactly what he deserved?